They say when you wear Black Power Media gear, you can accomplish anything. You can play any and every position. Coaching, to kicking, to receiving, to running and juking. And, oh, my goodness. Let's see that again in slow motion. Get off me. And you're going to have a lot of haters coming at you. But what you got to do is you got to shake them off, and get to your goal and accomplish it. And when that's done, it's a beautiful thing. I'm talking about going hard, extra, for that extra point. And when it's done beautifully, you talking about touchdown. Oh, and the crowd goes wild and they're celebrating with you and everything. Man, let's see that again. Nice.
Black Power Media, baby. That's how we do it.
Now go to blackpowermedia.org and get you some of that gear. Empower yourself today. Yeah.
You got to earn your liberation.
I couldn't get the overlay off. What's up, y'all? How y'all doing? So, welcome to Earn Your Liberation, episode 30. We got a full house today. I didn't even know our brother was going to show up.
I didn't know I was going to be here either.
We was actually interviewed, Diallo, you on mute. We was interviewing for your job last week. We got some arguments about we was too dark on here, so we lightened it up. We brought Eric on. But since you here, I mean, how y'all feeling? Erica, come off mute. How you feeling?
I'm good. Peace.
Late Diallo, you on mute still?
I didn't know Jared was gonna be here. You know, when the boss ain't here, you know, I was gonna. You see, I ain't in dress code. I ain't got nothing together. I thought we'd have another relaxing, peaceful session like last week, but I guess.
Oh, that's what you say. Well,
good times don't last.
That's how it be sometimes. What's up, everybody in the chat? How y'all feeling? So I think this morning we're gonna get started with some serious stuff, and then we're gonna get into the Diallo's hour. And because we get into some serious stuff, we brought on an esteemed guest. Erica, you want to introduce our esteemed guest, even though he don't need any introduction, but you want to bring the good brother on?
Yeah. My chair of the coordinating committee of Black Alliance.
Peace, brother. Jama, how you feeling?
I'm doing good. It's always good to be with you folks from Black Power Media, and get a chance to chop it up a little bit on some serious stuff, but also you all bring a certain kind of perspective, and you unpackage the sometimes ridiculous character of some issues that makes everybody, understand things a little bit better. So I'm hope to bring something to the table today. It's really a pleasure to be with you all. I saw a little bit of the session last week, and it was very good, very interesting. I mean, I made a few comments, but I'm glad to be with brother Diallo. But I hope nobody's gonna be trying to set up no thing here, because I don't know if y'all. I met brother Diallo down in Atlanta, and I was surprised. That's a big brother. Okay.
Let's not get confused. He's tall. Let's not get it confused. Big.
Yeah, but he's tall enough.
He might be 150 or something like that, but
all
right.
And then you, brother Geechee. Now, I lived in the South for 37 years. Okay. And I know that you don't fuck with nobody named Geechee. So, so I know you all strapped, but it ain't the old 9mm. It's that old straight razor stuff. So
yeah.
I'm going to be
roots.
on my P's.
They put roots on people.
There you go. I'm on my P's and Q's this morning. But no, it's good. It's good to be here.
Word.
And of course, always brother Jared, the godfather of this, who's been hitting this for a long time, and he brings it. And of course, my dear sister, Erica, who, is clearly one of the finest young intellectuals and revolutionaries we got here in this country, and really throughout the African world. So I'm just blessed to be here.
That's a bet. A bet. So I know we're going to get started with a couple things that I know everybody on the table agrees
Who's
with.
echoing though?
I don't know. I wonder if.
And I think my mic got fixed. And I apologize for crashing the party. I just had a couple minutes before baby girl goes to tryouts, and I just was a little bit intolerant of the melanin imbalance and all the hate last week. So I wanted to anyway. No, it's good to Jamu, Erica, is good to have you on, and fellas, it's good to be back on at least for a few minutes with the two of you as well, despite this echo.
Yeah, I think whenever we're not talking, I'm gonna just mute people. But I think we should good now. I don't hear echo now. But so what I wanted to get to start with, I don't hear echo. Maybe that's your computer right now. But something that we may all agree on, I don't think there's gonna be any disagreements here. But Cornel West is on his media run. Entertainment media run. And so he appeared on the Breakfast Club first. Well, for what I saw. He also appeared on what's the guy named Stephen A. Smith's. That was kind of a weird interview. I'm not sure what was going on there, but he appeared there. And I guess I wanted to get, and I'm gonna pull up a clip for us to talk about, but I want to get some initial thoughts. If any of y'all saw the interviews, and then what do y'all think? I've heard, I think Brianna Joy Gray said him showing up on the biggest hip hop or I guess black audience platform, Breakfast Club, is making the Democrats scared or is making them nervous. What are some of y'all thoughts initially about Cornell's new entertainment media run that he's on right now? John, you can start. Or go ahead.
I'm back.
But John, go ahead. You can start.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to pull up a clip, but it's an interesting thing. I mean, I think it's clearly strategic, and we shouldn't and we won't, downplay the importance of that interview on the Breakfast Club. I mean, Africans. There's a reason that Joe Biden went on that show, and I mean, the demographics of it is such that. I can understand why the Democratic strategists would be a little bit concerned because they know that they haven't presented anything to the masses of African people, in particular working class folks. They know that Biden is vulnerable. They know that they have no message that could really, beyond "we ain't Trump," really motivate people to come out and vote once again for the Democrats in 2024. So with Cornell doing his performance and raising some of the issues he was raising, and we know that the framing of someone, this won't be the framing that we would probably use necessarily, but I watched that very closely, and I think it was resonating with some folks. So I can understand why they might be nervous because they want the Democrats or black Democrats to basically just mindlessly give them their support. And for the first time, maybe since Jesse Jackson, not a maybe, but probably since Jesse Jackson in 84 and really in 87, 88, there's a possibility of at least part of their vote being contested, and that's.
Did you see the Stephen A. Smith interview too?
I just heard about it because I've been part of what I've been helping them with is in fact monitoring many of these interviews, and I didn't see that one. Yeah, I'm not sure how that even happened, but I kind of know how it may have happened.
I think Stephen A. was trying to present that he is some type of independent. And he called himself the devil's advocate a couple times. And
I know he's trying to get into politics. He's trying to see himself after ESPN one day, and he wants to be into politics. I thought he was going to try to be an independent conservative.
Yeah, you could tell he had no idea what the hell he was talking about. But Erica, go ahead. You had a thought.
Yeah, it was similar to Ajamu's. Obviously, this is strategic. He's campaigning, so we got to expect that he's going to hit as much marks. I don't think it's any more or less different than him going on CNN and taking on the challenge with Anderson Cooper. I think he's aware of the audiences that he has to reach. You know, he's trying to build a mass base. He's trying to come up for a nomination with the Green Party because I don't even think he has one yet. So it's important that he gets his message there. I mean, I don't have any quarrels with that. I just think that Brianna Joy like hypes the Democrats like a bit, where she's more interested in politicians or candidates that bother them as opposed to like what they have to offer, which I think is how she got caught up in the RFK Jr. push, irrespective to the issues. I'm not sure if she hopped off that bandwagon yet. I hope she did. But I think that that's really how she engages politics. Who pisses off the Democrats more? That maybe should be somebody we look into. But I don't have any quarrels with him going on there, especially that he didn't say anything that we haven't heard him say, especially on this platform. So I think it's maybe, you know, as much people as you can bring into that mass base. I think my criticism still remains, what do you plan to do with that base? You know, there's no real answer for that yet, but I understand what he's doing strategically.
Well, the second clip, I wonder if we heard him say something like this before, which we'll play in a second, because it sounds like he was kind of pandering to his audience, but we don't know. Diallo, Jared, any thoughts initially about this making the Democrats scared? I know.
Diallo, go ahead.
I don't think that. I don't see. I'm scared because I don't want to, you know, upset people. But I don't take the position that there's no difference between the Democratic and Republican Party, and I don't feel that Republicans have. I mean, the Democrats have nothing to offer except not Trump. But I don't think that the Democrats are really up in arms about these upstarts. I think this is part of the U.S. political theater. And I do think that that Cornel, as of yet, not saying that he couldn't be, he hasn't presented himself a real threat or a real substantial presence in this particular political cycle of the 2024 political cycle. I don't think, you know, media platforms like the Breakfast Club, even though they're extremely powerful, I don't think they're as influential as because they get a lot of eyeballs. It's kind of like that little geeky kid that brought all those people to Times Square to tear shit up. It doesn't really challenge the status quo. It's not a threat to the status quo. In fact, I think these type of actions, even though you can get massive eyes or even massive bodies in the streets, you have to say, what are they there for? So if you got a bunch of, you know, 20,000 raging teens in the streets for a PlayStation, you know, to get a PlayStation 5, that's not a manifestation of power or even a potential for power. To me, that's a manifestation of the status quo and how powerful and entrenched the status quo is. So when you have these upstarts that come, that show up every political cycle, they ain't doing shit before or after the political cycle. We only get active, we only get political when the oppressor says, and I'm not saying we as the people here, of course, but we in terms of the black voting masses, the people who put these bodies into positions of authority or legitimize authority. We only get active on a schedule. We only get active when we have permission to be active. And that's not real activity. That's being turned on and off. So I see Cornel West, somebody had to do it. Somebody had to be the upstart, the person that could portray to the U.S. citizens in the world that, hey, the United States is a true democracy when it's not. It's an oligarchy. It's a duopoly with two entrenched parties that structurally, regardless of how popular an upstart candidate is, how legitimate an upstart candidate is, no matter what the upstart candidate has to offer the people, eventually we know what it's going to boil down to. Cracker one, cracker two. So I'm just not that impressed by Cornel West. I don't think the stances that he's taken, you know, I get tired of him calling everybody brother, because if everybody your brother, nobody's your brother. I get sick of that. I get sick of the rhythm and blues rhetoric and jazz rhetoric. And I don't like that he's not, especially in this cycle and in the position where he can literally say whatever he wants to say. He's not, to me, he's saying all the safe liberal shit and the safe progressive shit, but he ain't got nothing revolutionary on the table, which I don't expect from a political cycle. But since you are, like we pointed out, sitting there to the Breakfast Club, to you talking to the horde, to the masses, you should be able to say some things that haven't been said yet. And if you ain't gonna get up there and say some things that haven't been said yet, what you even running for?
I mean,
so he at least did that though. And just quickly, I think Erica raises probably the most important point about what is Cornell going to do with the race and beyond the campaign. And then I would only want to also add that I could see the Democrats only wanting to build him up so that they could blame him when they lose for running their own horrific candidate and campaign to fraudulently hold up Cornell West as the boogeyman that caused them to lose. But in the clip that I did at least see on the Breakfast Club, I mean, even in somewhat passingly referencing Mumia and political prisoners, he brings up something. Okay, well, he brings up something that they're not usually talking about, and you can see Charlamagne's sort of knee-jerk response was kind of predictable.
But I think that's my point. So I guess I tried to do this little survey thing to see how people will respond to hearing Mumia, Dhoruba, and Assata. And like you said, he'll throw his stuff in there. But Charlamagne once told me that he can bring in whoever he want, and he can talk to whoever he want. But maybe we saw here, and I'll play the clip, that if you come on there talking about what you want to talk about, he can probably redirect you or clip it out. But can y'all hear it?
No.
Oh, let me hit the.
You gotta unmute it, yeah. Unmute it there, and then probably refresh the browser and unmute it to get it to start over again. And you're running that through Chrome, right? I know we're being real professional here on.
Yeah. They're gonna try to crush you like a cockroach.
You ready for that?
Oh, I've been ready for that all my life.
That's right.
Black love is a crime in a white supremacist world.
Oh my God.
Anybody who falls in love with black people will be criminalized in a white supremacist
We've
world.
seen it happen so many times.
Every major black leader we had who fell in love with us.
That's right.
Criminalized, character assassination, literal assassination, marginalization, incarceration. Mumia Abu-Jamal, we can go on and on. Dhoruba, so many of the political, Sister Shakur Assata and others.
Would you put JFK in that?
JFK? No, I wouldn't put JFK.
Okay.
I mean, I love my Irish brothers and sisters, but no, JFK.
Everybody your brother, man.
Is he and Robert Kennedy, who was the father of RFK Jr., God bless him. They're the ones that put the FBI surveillance on Martin and kept track of it and tried to drive Martin to suicide. You see, I love Martin too much to forget that.
So even before we comment there, I want to play this other one because I know Erica said that he probably didn't say anything we didn't hear before, but it seems like this one particular statement, I'm not sure if I ever heard this, and I don't know if it was like a reference to the music in the entertainment industry, but let's play this one too.
We got too many black leaders who are no longer on the love train, they're on the gravy train.
Ooh, they about the money.
It's about
their money.
The Benjamins, Wu-Tang Clan, Cream.
Around me.
But it don't have to rule me. Rule everything around me.
That's right.
That's the genius from Staten Island, right?
That's right.
That's real. The highest standards that we set are our black musicians. Black musicians are the vanguard of the black freedom struggle. Because it's in black music that black people experience a foretaste of the freedom that we want. The anthem of my brothers in prison for 41 years. It could be in Greensville and Poughkeepsie. It could be in Sing Sing. I'm talking Rawway. I'm talking Garden City. What's the anthem? Zoom by the Commodore.
So I guess the two questions is one, is him mentioning Mumia and these people like that. Is there any net positive? So on my small research thing, I looked on the comments, nobody said nothing. And nobody, like most people was tripping about him throwing JFK in there, but is it a net positive there? And then two, how do you feel about this, musicians being the vanguard? We can start with John Wood and go around.
Well, let me say it. Let me frame it like this: as an organizer who understands and centers the absolute necessity for the ideological struggle that we are involved in. Any time that we have an opportunity to get access to a mass audience is a good thing. Now, we ain't there. Cornel West is there. And so if Cornel West is providing some analysis, that then those of us who are organizing can perhaps maybe even reference, use, amplify, build on, or whatever, that's not a bad thing. If, masses of people listening to that Breakfast Club, many may not have even heard of Mumia. If they get a chance to hear about Mumia and then maybe sparks their interest to follow up, then that's a good thing. We're trying to create counter narratives. We're trying to win the people over. We're trying to draw people into struggle. And we use whatever particular weapons we use strategically at a particular historical moment. I don't need Cornell to mirror everything that I would say or Erica would say. It's not going to happen. I would love to have Erica sitting up there besides Cornell, but we ain't got there yet. I hope we can get there. We got an invitation to get up there. We definitely will be there. Okay, because this is an ideological struggle. This ain't no game. And we don't necessarily need to feel intellectually superior or whatever. We don't play these kind of elitist games. What we have to do is look at things as they appear to us to be, and to see how these things can be used strategically. Okay, I end by saying this. This so-called war in Ukraine, for example, started in February 2022. How many anti-war analysis, anti-war views have we seen in the mainstream media? I answer it for you. One. And who was that? That was Cornel West. Okay. So this African has an access for a moment, because understand they're going to this notion that he doesn't represent any type of threat to the neoliberal bourgeoisie, to me it seems to come out of an analysis that doesn't seem to be connected to what is really unfolding. There's nothing there. For the last 3 weeks, there's been a series of hit pieces in the bourgeois press and in the so-called liberal left press, decrying his candidacy, urging him not to run, suggesting that his candidacy is a threat to democracy. Okay, if there was no threat, then they would do what they normally do with us, and that's basically to ignore us. Okay, but for a moment at least, they can't do that. So the question is, how do we take advantage of that? And I just say this: look, I'm an African. When this kid AOC came up, and everybody like, oh, she ain't revolutionary enough. I defended AOC for the first 2 months. I'm like, as an organizer, this is a 28-year-old sister. I'm not going to dismiss this young person because she may not be where I would like her to be on certain kinds of issues. I want to see what she's going to bring to the table. I wish we had access to her to maybe help to cultivate her if she wasn't a straight up opportunist, which I don't know if she was or not. I don't know. Okay. Bernie Sanders. I don't give a. Bernie Sanders can't articulate a socialism that I articulate and people we work with articulate. Well, we raised a very simple question. When's the last time for a moment you heard somebody in the mainstream press even use the word socialism? So you build off of that. But some of the most fiercest critics of a Bernie Sanders were folks who ain't doing no organizing work. They have no base, they ain't building no base nowhere. Okay. But you can sit back and just articulate and pontificate and shit. You know, that to me has no real, well, it has some value because sometimes we have to do that. We need to engage in the battle of ideas. So, that's all right. But, as long as we don't get confused, as long as we don't use our platforms to basically undermine people who are attempting to try to deal with objective reality and change objective reality. So, you know, so this thing with Cornell, and look, Cornell don't have the answers. I can tell you this: Cornell is as he says, as a jazz man. This cat is improvising. He is trying to make some things up. He's trying to get some people around him that can help to ground the campaign, give it some direction. He has some ideals, okay, but if we're looking for some clearly articulated, coherent stuff right now, it ain't gonna happen. And lastly,
so you could judge me as how you would like in terms of where I am in building a grassroots base, but I do disagree with the AOC Bernie assessment. Like, I was always against all of their engagement because I thought they were false representations of an actual left. West, though, I think, to your point, Ajamu, as I think I understand it, is something different. And I think that difference should be investigated and built on. Where I don't think he represents some fraudulent representation of a left. I think if you looked at AOC's what really produced her, what produced Bernie, it's very different than what's producing Cornel West. So I think that there, to your point, is on that end something to be done with it. Sorry, Erica, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I agree. John and I don't agree on everything. AOC is one of them. I've had like super harsh criticisms. I mean, I guess in its inception, when the primaries were coming, it was a really big deal to get people out there, to see people activated in the Bronx, especially, to go out there and vote. But once she won primaries and then that website completely changed the next day, the writing was on the wall what was going to come. Similarly with Bernie, I think that my criticism of Bernie mirrors, Bruce Dixon's. I think that socialism was a Trojan horse for DSA candidates to sort of ram through their politician dreams or their political dreams, but they had no actual grounding. I also think, and largely, social democracy is a sham. If we look at Latin America, I think it leads into liberalism that breeds into fascism. If we look at how it actually moves, because like AOC and like a Bernie, they punch left to move right to bring the left in again, which is not a strategy at all. I think in terms of Cornel West, I have cautionary optimism. I think that, I find it interesting that he would call Black entertainers a vanguard, but then when I raised the question about what do you intend to do with the masses, he called that vanguardism. He called that Leninism. So I think that that's an interesting distinction. When I asked, what are we going to do with this? You build up this base. What political project do you have? And he said, "Oh, that's Leninism." So
maybe if you had been singing it,
right,
put some bars on it.
I was wondering why Ojamu and Jared skip over that. Maybe because they trying to rehash Mama's Biscuits and they want to be. I'm not sure why they just skipped over that part, but
if you let us be the lumping to the Panthers, let us be we can. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't disagree with the use of Black art and Black, I think I wrote about that in What Happened to What is Black Culture. Like, there is a revolutionary aspect to music. There has been a Black arts movement that has been the backbone to Black power and civil rights struggles. But to the extent that they're the vanguard, I think that places too much emphasis on what it does or what it can do. I think that being on a Breakfast Club and being on a radio station, those things kind of maybe connect more. And maybe that's where he was going, to make that connection, because he is on a music station, to say how powerful music is, to maybe activate or agitate musicians, or even try to, because a lot of what he says, a lot of what he does is specific to the audience that he's in, which is why, even though he has the same message, it comes across differently on all these platforms because he's trying to tailor it to where he's at, which brings its own set of contradictions, like when he goes on Joe Rogan or where he talks to the right. Um, but I do think, again, he is improvising, he is attempting, and I do think that it's an important moment, not for him, but for organizers, especially to see where we can captivate, what we can take from, what we can use, and how we can build off his message. Because I think that getting caught on the personality of Cornel West, and then depicting and taking away and trying to analyze everything he's doing as a candidate does not leave space for us as organizers to figure out exactly how we can make use of what he's doing. And then we get caught up in personality.
Right. So Diallo, what you got? You hear him mentioning revolutionaries. You hear him talking about music artists being the vanguard. Like, it sounds like in a consensus so far. And what do you say?
Like I said, I think every election cycle this happens. I mean, and it's on the left and the right. I think the fact that the liberals or the Democratic establishment are attacking Cornel West is just par for the course. I mean, DeSantis is being attacked, and all the Republican upstarts are also being attacked. When you don't toe the party line, even though you come out of and you're born into the mainstream party, when you don't toe the party line, I mean, this is just, what else are the political press going to write about in the U.S. In the United States? Politics is entrenched in and captured by capitalism. Even though capitalism is not a political system, the economic system has captured and dictates the political system. So politics is treated like consumerism. It's treated like a consumer product. And we who are politically conscious, politically engaged, we begin to kind of engage the political system. Like, I have my wish list, I have my shopping list, and then I go to the store, I go to the Democrat Republican store, and I see which one of them I can check off my shopping list for, when that's not really how politics works, especially in the United States. And then we go and say, well, I see a lot of the same products in both of these stores. There's no difference between the two stores. This is not about consumerism. As someone had mentioned before, this is about ideology. And, for a brother to sit there 1 minute and say, I love JFK, and then talk about the imperialist atrocities that JFK committed and the national atrocities and subversions of Black liberation struggles, how you do both of that? How you do that? You canceling your damn self out. So, like, everybody your brother, but then you're going to turn. So I don't really look at or engage politics like that. I don't think it's a flex to go on the Breakfast Club. That is a own product. That it is a platform that is owned by the capitalists for pushing capitalism and capitalist products. And I had to go back to old school Marshall McLuhan. The medium is the message. A lot of times, the very moment you show up on that platform, it doesn't matter what you say. The fact that you're on that platform communicates everything that really needs to be said about you. And I don't care if you're on there talking about snow bunnies like Umar, or you on there talking, legitimate political ideology or political strategies like Cornel. Ultimately, you're going to be they're waiting for that memeable or viral moment that they can distill down, and the larger message that you're bringing to the medium is going to get swallowed up by the medium and its normal course of operation. So again, I think I'm old enough to where I've been through so many political cycles in the United States that I just keep seeing the same thing repeated. And I think, and I'll finish with this, Black people, we really need to start to grasp what Neely Fuller called areas of human relations. And we really need to look at the formal political structure and the state, and understand what the role of the state is, what is the potential for harm and the potential for extraction of resources or directing of the state. I think we need to be cold, sober, and more calculating when it comes to U.S. politics.
So speaking of U.S. politics and one of his opponents, let's not spend too much time on this orange man. Maybe 3 statements or sentences that you have when you think about the Trump's indictment, the extremists, Trump right wing terrorists, and we can start with Erica and kind of go around. Quick thoughts on it.
But before we go there, can I just make one before we switch topics? Anybody out there listening that has contacts to the Breakfast Club and can get me or Erica or a Black Alliance of Peace on it, please do that. Okay?
Geechee does.
Well, so Jared ruined my my contact. So we me and Charlemagne unfortunately grew up together, but yeah, I can try, but I don't think he don't.
You're muted.
Just Africa.
Say that again.
My point. Am I still muted?
Yeah. No, you back.
Well, my point is this: Africans. You know, I don't. This sort of abstractionism in terms of what comes out or what happens with the media. I don't engage in that. You know, I look at the fact that we're trying to get access to the masses of our people. And if we have an opportunity to get onto a show like that, where you have a bunch of young folks listening to it, and we can talk about AFRICOM, who we know they ain't never even heard of. We can talk about the pending invasion of Haiti. We can talk about how, you know, they're concerned about what's happening with police forces in the U.S., but they have never heard of 1033, how these folks actually get militarized. And we can talk about and bring some issues, and if we are able to reach 2 people, then that's positive. That's what you're trying to do. We don't give a fuck about, that this is a part of a corporate system. We understand that. We understand capitalism. We study capitalism, you know. So we basically understand what tools we have access to, and we use them if we can. And we're not concerned about being absorbed or co-opted. You can't co-opt the politics that we run, okay? And that's why you won't see us in those places. That's why you won't see Erica and Dr. CBS and on the cover of Essence magazine like they did Black Lives Matter folks, you know, because basically this is a different kind of politics. It's a serious kind of politics, okay? So, you know, my comment about AOC or whatever. Look, we know AOC is a pig now, but I couldn't and did not dismiss AOC in her first few months because I don't know what this is all about. I saw how she shifted. I understand the pressure she had on her in terms of being an opportunist, you know, but sometimes people become opportunists when they also don't think there's a real sufficient base out there for them to develop if they do have a radical element to develop that component. Okay. I can't do that as an organizer who's been doing this shit for 50 some years. Okay. Same thing with Bernie Sanders. Fuck Bernie Sanders. Okay. But Bernie Sanders brought something to the discourse that was important. And those of us who are actually trying to organize, we use some of that. Okay. And we say, look, we ain't talking about Bernie Sanders socialism. Our socialism consists of X, Y, and Z. But we're dealing with folks who, for the first time, heard even the term. Okay, so they're not going to be fashioning our politics. We build on that to the extent that we can get access to the masses directly ourselves. So we do that. So this is, to me, this is real stuff. Okay, and I just can't deal with the, you know, and I deal with the abstractionism and all of that. But you know, I'm not concerned with these super critical perspectives that basically, you know, are not helping us to move concretely in terms of how you build concrete organization, how you build an effective opposition.
But I don't think that I feel like I do feel a kind of way about that. I don't feel like being critical of Bernie and AOC is abstractionism, and I think because my point is they're okay. I mean, I'm just maybe I'm you know.
Yeah, so I'm not saying
y'all are arguing Bernie in 2023.
No,
I'm not.
No.
That's get a late pass.
But that's
the Bernie,
not what I'm
the
saying.
Bernie phenomenon is still there.
The Bernie phenomenon is still there, and he did just produce that book, and people still make reference. And I'm just saying, I think the work that you all and others are trying to do is hampered by the mis and false representations of the politics that you all tried to espouse and make it harder to do that work. But
it makes it easier. To me, it makes it easier because basically we we easily differentiate from a Bernie Sanders socialism. We can differentiate from a Democrat socialist, it's social democracy. We easily do that. There's no question about that. Well, I'm just saying you don't dismiss these elements in the popular culture that perhaps can be used for radical opposition.
Yeah, I think it's more or less speaking to strategic. Like, what is the objectives? What are you trying? What is the ultimate goal? And then strategically, tactically, how do you get to that? How do you win over your objective? And I think the mass media could be seen as a strategy or a tactic to win over your objective. But I think you have to actually have an objective to to work towards, as opposed to just mindlessly going on these shows. So I guess in terms of Cornel West, we really have to analyze, well, what objectively are you trying to do? What are the goals that you're trying to reach? And then we could say, okay, so that was a net positive for you to be on that show, or it was a net negative. But we have to really start speaking in terms of organizations and organizers. Like, we have to have objectives that we're trying to reach, as opposed to just building a base mindlessly to build a base.
And you all trained Cornel West, right? Well, you all trained Cornel West. The Cornel West that came on the show the first time, and the Cornel West we saw the other day is a different Cornel West, partly because of the kind of stuff that he was doing with this channel.
That was the point I made on Geechee's post on Instagram. Yeah. I did take BPM credit for the Darubas and the Mumia references. I thought, and I agree. I think in that and that's the part I do agree with. I think it's good that he went in that space, and I think he's capable of doing it.
Diallo trying to get the money.
He got a bunch of
and we used it to
people.
Pay
Y'all better get political consulting fee directly from Cornell.
We just shifted it into Diallo's account.
So listen. Since y'all wanted to get into some gangster shit,
money. Can I say something? Can I just share something? I think we in terms of getting on these platforms, or whether or not we go on the Breakfast Club or not, I think, there's basically 4 in terms of reaching the community or communication within the struggle. You have these levels, what you have is the billboard, you have the boulevard, you have the boardroom, and you have the back room. And in each of those levels of communication, whether the billboard that's to be spread to everybody, the boulevard, which is just talking to people strictly in your community and amongst, your allies, comrades, and community, and the boardroom is semi-public. People know that it exists, and they can know what the decisions are made there, but they're not really privy to the process. And then you got the back room, which is only for the chosen few that fully invested. And in all those levels, I think we stir it up. We do a lot of boardroom talk, and we put it up on billboards. We put a lot of boulevard talk, and we bring that BS to the boardroom and the back room. I think that in this arena of politics, I say that we have to get some clarity and strategy. And as I think it was Geechee was saying, or somebody in the comments, I'm not sure where it came from, but people we got to be clear of what can be secured and how it can be secured, and the agenda and the methodology for securing it. And other than that, move on. I think we should understand, we all understand, ain't no liberation coming from electoral politics.
Shout out to the 420 guests.
So we really have to communicate and articulate to our people, because I think we lose our people when we go to them and say, well, there's no difference between the Democrats and Republicans, or the Republicans or the Democrats are the solution, or the Democrats are evil. I think when we come with these, just absolutist and inaccurate conclusions or positions on the political system or the parties within the political arena, I think we lose the majority of the people, and we end up just speaking to people who have reached the same conclusions as us. But we have to, understand that there is a level of complexity.
I'm so glad you just segue into, so we're gonna skip Trump now. Y'all wanted to get into some gangster shit, so we're gonna skip Trump.
So while you
I don't think we should skip Trump, because I think
you take that segue real quick, I'm just gonna say thanks for letting me jump in real quick. I'm gonna take baby girl to tryouts and jump into the audience side. Thanks everybody.
I wish her good luck.
Yeah. Oh no, she
Wish her
killing
good
it
luck.
out there.
We gonna get
She
into
don't need
Trump
no luck.
later.
No luck
All right.
necessary. All right.
Then
peace,
we're wishing humility on her then.
Yeah, all right, there you go.
So listen, we can get into Trump later, right? So for now, let's go into an area where, and you just made a great point, right? Just being streamlined or throwing stuff out there and not adding nuance. So last week we had this conversation, and it was a little testy, but let's start with some updates that you might have heard in the Sahel, and even this statement that that the AAPRP has made. I guess we can start with, do you agree with it? And then let's get into some updates that you might feel. So, so one of the things that's that kind of was argued about last week was this idea of revolution. And they explain how in their statement it's not a revolution. They understand what a revolution is, but it's headed in the right direction. So again, we have new information from last week. Anybody want to start with any updates or any thoughts about what they heard last week, and then what we could probably see as evidence this week?
Why you put up?
Say that again. Say that again.
Why you put a BAP statement?
Oh, my bad. Send that to me, the link. I'll put it up.
But
That's still BAP. No, I appreciate the context that the AAPRP has given on this. I think it's very important to understand. I do want to say, though, I don't think that the discrepancy last week was about what revolution is. I think it was whether or not something had the potential to be revolutionary, which I think on the offshoot was just dismissed completely. And then, eventually cleared up and walked back. But I think that's where the debate or the struggle was really about. How do we analyze a coup, whether or not they are, it was just absolute terms about whether or not coups have the potential to be revolutionary. And I think that's where the debate was. But in terms of what's happening in the Sahel, they're still moving forward with military intervention. We know Victoria Nuland was just there attempting to strong arm Niger into some sort of agreement to restore order, constitutional order, restore the president. That didn't work out too good for Victoria Nuland. She got sent back. She never got to see the ex-president. But she did say that there was some conversations that were had, even though no one spoke to her directly. Burkina Faso and Mali, as far as I know, are still vowing to support. Guinea-Conakry made a statement recently. I think it's probably important to clear up that the statements that have been going around online as far as Algeria saying that they're going to send military support has been false. They've never made those statements. They've only condemned any sort of military intervention. Nigeria, the head of Nigeria, who is the head of ECOWAS, is still pushing for military intervention in spite of the Nigerian Senate voting it down. So currently, that's all what's happening in the Sahel in Nigeria.
So real quick before the two brothers go, I know you said something about the coup, and even in the article it says of the 106 coups in Africa since the 50s, 103 of them have been reactionary coups. And so again, I know that, I'm not sure if last week they was talking about percentages. Oh, well, majority of them wasn't good. We should be mindful. But either one of the brothers, go ahead. I know John will go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I really, I'm glad you started with the AAPRP piece, because that's important, because they do lay out the distinction between, or they make a distinction between what they would consider to be reactionary coups from the possibility of a coup representing progressive forces. I think part of the argument or the discussion that was happening last week, and it was a good one, was not just I think the nature of a coup, but a question around the route to power. How does one arrive at seizing the state in order to actually begin a revolutionary process? Because people sometimes get confused with the revolutionary process, thinking that the struggle for power, the actual seizing of the state, represents, in fact, the revolution. It's an aspect of it. But the revolution really begins once you are in a place to begin to transform your society. And so the question was whether or not that can happen through a coup. And what the party lays out is, in fact, it really depends on the specificity of a national context, the particular class and social forces. And there's no objective formula for how one arrives at a place where you can begin to transform your society. Anything less than understanding what Cabral talked about in terms of understanding the reality of your land can cause you to make political errors. There's no formulas. There is a sharp analysis. And I think that the people have already raised that already again today in terms of having a critical analysis of the electoral process, what it really implies, that kind of sharp analysis of your objective reality is what guides your theory, and then what guides your practice. So, that's where I think we got caught up a little bit, because I think some folks thought that if you didn't have a certain kind of route to power, then that automatically delegitimized the project. And I think that's one of the points that that piece by the party kind of touches on.
Okay.
Over.
So Diallo, you have this idea, even in the article, it talks about how obviously the more coups didn't work than it did, but there could be a positive thing under proper conditions, right? This coup could be something positive. And again, if they claim that it's headed in the right direction, what are your thoughts on that statement, and but also updates that you've seen or noticed about?
The only way for a coup to be positive is for a coup to dismantle itself. It's like the Negro elite or the Negro bourgeoisie or the black capitalists. The only way for them to be positive is to commit class suicide. The only way for it to be good is for it not to exist. There is no military rule. The military rule is status quo. Military is a branch of the government. I just like last week, everybody got up in arms. They claimed they wanted analysis, but like I said, it seems like people were more interested in cheerleading than analysis. I started off by acknowledging the limitations we have here in the West, being embedded, being part of the African diaspora, our limitations in terms of understanding and access to information. I noted the positive components, the rhetoric and proposed policies. But then when we got to the points of the red flags and the risk, shit fell apart last week. And I ain't interested in revisiting that, because I do feel, I'm glad that other, entities that are larger and more established than I am, like the All African People Revolutionary Parties, are also making essentially the same statements. Too often, and I have to make it pedestrian, I just bring it home because I am speaking as a member of the African diaspora, and I'm not on the ground there with the brothers and sisters. So I have to make it pedestrian. Black people, we recognize that trickle-down economics is illegitimate and it doesn't work. But every time a wealthy Black person, LeBron James, come to give us a school, or some other wealthy class enemy comes with the vanity project, we celebrate shit we condemn in any other type of circumstances. It's the same thing with a coup d'etat. It's the same thing with the military takeover, military governance, and military occupation of the government. That just by design, military structure by design. Even if I join the revolutionary African militaries aren't democratic. They are strict hierarchies. They are top-down strict hierarchies. So if a military expert, a military-minded person, or a military structure takes control of the state, it as history, and all I could go off of, because I can't predict the future, is the historical record, the historical and political precedents, is that it can't be a thing. And it kind of disturbs me, whether it's Obama, and when Obama was talking about his military aggression, and the majority of Black people in the United States supported Obama because he's Black and we trusted him, but even though Black people had a long history of opposing U.S. military aggression. And it's the same thing. Now we got some Black people who are, and everybody's telling me, well, people are supporting, the people are celebrating. Nonetheless, outside of emotion, looking at the facts available to us, to the history available to us, I, based on principle, based on principle. Even if a revolutionary, quote unquote, capitalist came to prominence, I, as a socialist, can't celebrate a capitalist. Even if those capitalists are beating the shit out of my enemy, you still a capitalist. So when the military takes over the apparatus of the state, takes over a civilian government, I can't sanction that. And even as I stated, many of the leaders are quick to say and quick to articulate, we intend to hold elections. We intend to surrender power. Because even those brothers who have taken that measure, who've taken that step, justified or otherwise, understand that this is not sustainable and it's not wholly legitimate, because we weren't put in power by the people. Even if the people support us currently, they do not have any representation or any status within this current government structure. And I just think we need, no matter how desperate things we got to stick to our principles. As Kwame Ture said, we can negotiate and transform tactics, methods, but we cannot. One thing we cannot negotiate or compromise are principles.
Okay. So listen, I don't speak the perfect English, Spanish, or French, but Tina, since she got 5 on it, coup instead of coup. My bad. Keep correcting me and keep sending the money. We appreciate it all. But look, so
say, if you want to look real smart, just say coup d'etat. Say coup d'etat, and that way.
Coup d'etat.
Yeah, now you sound damn. You even look smarter after saying that.
I just want to respond quickly. I do want to say shout out to the AAPRP. You know, I just made a little joke because I know Salif was watching. But shout out to the people that came together to write that, including Salifu. Because that statement came from somebody that you were in disagreement with last week. That's part of that party. But that's what I don't think that I don't think that the disagreement was fundamentally about what has the potential to be revolutionary. And I feel like in your last statement, you talked about absolutism, and you're basically arguing absolutism. I mean, dialectically, we have to understand or see these things dialectically. All things are in motion. There's a positive and negative at all times. There's a times where positive have negatives and negatives have positives. Dialectically, we need to understand that because all things are in motion, there are times that out of the 106 coups, that 3 of them would be revolutionary because things are always in motion. We set that historical materialism sets that up to help us understand what brings the process forward. So we can't just look at everything and say, well, because this happened, we should be a little more, not to say that we shouldn't be cautious, but because this happened, it's going to happen this way here. And that was the caution of applying one-to-one analysis from the U.S. because the U.S. has a completely different historical material reality from what's happening in Africa, what's happening in Sahel even. How, like, the structure of the Sahel currently is brought forth by the destructive of Libya, which pushed all those weapons and pushed those terrorists into the Sahel. And so the calls that we're seeing from the people in support of these militaries, in support of these coups, come out of that historical basis of what the material reality that they're living under. They are sick of the West. So they're taking their bets. But what I feel like there's a lot of paternalism and infantilism of what Africans and what happens with Africans and their conditions and how they set their paths and what objectives. Because it's always like, no, that's not going to be, that just has no potential. And I think that is where the issue was in this initial statement that you made. The initial statement brushed off because has the potential to be reactionary or because you feel a certain way about the military. But I feel like that we have to understand that all states do not come up or function or in the same way. I mean, we could argue that militaries have a particular structure, but then we can go to Venezuela and see something completely different about how they handle their military or how embraced the military is. Or we go to Nicaragua and see something completely different. My point in that I'm making is that states do not all function the same, and even the state apparatus are not all used in the same way. So we can't look at it in the one-to-one. But in terms of what we're analyzing in Niger, we have to analyze that dialectically. So again, I do agree with cautionary optimism, but analyzing it dialectically leads to cautionary optimism because you're understanding the conditions to which has led to this process. So we have to understand that, yes, some things are bad, but at the same time, they have the potential for good because things stay in motion.
So let me ask this real quick.
But in terms
wait,
of
wait,
bro.
I know it's a lot of. So let me ask this real quick, and then we let Ajamo go. Then you can respond. So one of the things that you said was this idea of dealing with what's in front of us. You know, getting past the emotional part and dealing with what's in front of us. And then we also know that there's narratives that's put in front of us. Like last week, the sister came on with a CIA reference, even though there might have been agreements. So there's this other thing about the Guardian journalist saying that the Russian military group Wagner is taking advantage of this chaos and anti-French sentiments. I know you made a comment like that last week, Diallo, but when you think about the Wagner group, when you think about what's on front of us, and even things that was just said before, just now, Ajamo, you go ahead, and then Diallo, and then Eric.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to comment that dialectical analysis, I think, helps us to avoid the error sometimes of slipping inadvertently into a kind of Western paternalism, believing that perhaps these Africans know a little less than what they really do, because we know more, because we have a certain kind of perspective. And echo also the point that the sister made, that again, this is what I think the statement is also suggesting, is that again, you have to look at the specific national realities, including the character of those particular states. And when you do that, then you can come up with the kind of analysis that could help you to avoid articulating positions that could inadvertently also prop up the positions of your opposition. The very fact that the U.S. one update real quick to Sister Erica's update is that in fact ECOWAS has decided that they're going to in fact send a military force into Niger, and that's going to be problematic. You know, the very fact that these moves are being made by the U.S., by NATO, by the EU, suggests that there's more of a threat there than perhaps people completely understand. Okay, when you look at the kind of politics being articulated by these militaries, and talking about things like another West Africa federated state, these are in fact real threats to European hegemony. Okay, and brother Diallo is absolutely correct in terms of, and this, but I think there's a confusion here. That he made again a passionate argument against a position that no one articulated. That no one suggested that the military takes over, and the military it becomes the de facto head of state forever. That basically, in most of these progressive coups, if you will, coups that are enacted like in Burkina Faso because of the relative weakness of the left, that one of the things they do in fact move toward, if they're serious, is moving toward a developing of some kind of revolutionary democratic control and democratic process. They understand that if it is not something that's been grounded in the masses, that it can and does often become reactionary. So, you know, we want to move away from mechanical sometimes, and it's the term that Sister Erica used, absolutism. You can't do that. If you do that, then basically you make critical mistakes that can end up undermining not only your position, but propping up the analysis that comes from forces that we are really opposed to. Over.
Thank you. Go ahead, Diallo.
Well, I would recommend to Jamu that you revisit last week's discussion. I mean, we had a brother on who literally said the military is the people. And if you look at the comments, if you look at the comments,
wait, Diallo. So I think we're real. I think it's important. I got it. So I think it's important to like.
All I'm saying.
I know what you're saying, but let's be clear. When we hear people talk about this king instead of the latter king, or this Malcolm instead of the latter Malcolm, we get angry. When you hear the brother correct himself and said, "No, I apologize. I misspoke. I didn't mean that." Don't still say that's what he said, because he undid it. So
I'm just trying to articulate the point that when he was called out, he couldn't support that position and he capitulated. But I was also, before you got in, when he stated that. And also, if you look at the comments, there were a lot of people that agreed. Only a couple of people challenged that, and he eventually abandoned that. But I'm out here. I'm interacting with people every day. People are articulating that this is a revolutionary act. They are supporting the military coups, and they do think that the military coups are. And I, again, it's, the bottom line is the military is state control. It's still state control. The respect.
Catherine, you're confused about the state. You don't understand the state.
Control.
You are confused, my brother. You don't understand. If a military moves against the state, it's not state control, objectively, my brother.
No, if you take over the apparatus of the state and you begin to govern a territory, you have captured the state. A coup d'etat is literally the government. It's the military takeover of the government. They haven't dismantled the government. They haven't dismantled the hierarchies. They're all still in place. They've just replaced them. I think we don't understand, replacing power versus dismantling power. I agree it's been 2 weeks, and I think we're celebrating prematurely. I agree with you. Yeah, it's way too early to draw any definitive conclusions, and it's too early to celebrate from my point of view.
It's not too early to support the masses to believe that something positive has happened. We don't need to be above the masses with our superior analysis and objective understandings. Right now, the masses appear to support the move made by their military, and we are standing with the masses until otherwise.
No, that's not how I get down. I'm sorry, and I don't think myself. But if I have a divergent position from the masses, then I have to go against the masses, and I'm not going to just. And that's just the conclusions. I'll celebrate with the masses when I align with the masses, and when I have a divergent conclusions or divergent analysis from the masses, then I'll articulate that. And I'm not hostile to the masses. I'm not against the masses, and that's why, as I don't want to get no Cornell West going, but I love the people, and part of love and respect of the people is to articulate the truth or articulate the understandings and conclusions I've reached, regardless of if it's popular or not. So
as long as your critical analysis does not bleed into cynicism.
Real quick, I don't think that the question was answered. One second. The question about, so again, I know the Guardian made their statement about Wagner, and Diallo, we had conversation about Wagner, and there's all kind of conversation about Wagner. But is there evidence to help you?
I told you when you came to me talking about it's an equal partnership.
No. See, I don't want you to misrepresent stuff. I ask you because again, when somebody comes and tell me they know something, I'm gonna ask questions. So I said, is it a possibility that they're using each other? And then
yes.
So when
I was getting to it. Can I say it? You scared for me to say
ironically,
what was
you can't listen. Ironically, you can't get to something if the question ain't even out yet. So I can pause right now and say, Diallo, tell me my question that I was about to answer. Let's go. What question I was about to ask, Diallo?
I didn't say you were about to ask a question. I was
asking a question. You were asking. Tell me what question. No, you started
what
talking.
I was saying is
you was about to answer a question that I didn't ask yet, right?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, so why are you talking? Let me finish asking the question.
Why am I talking?
Yeah, because I'm asking the question. Let me finish.
I'll be glad when Jared get back, man. You're getting a little full of yourself, man.
No, I just want to ask the question. Let me get my question off.
Okay,
you can talk all you want afterwards.
You go.
You made a comment in the group chat, in the private chat, publicly or whatever.
In the DMs, and stay out my DMs, Geechee.
This guy. And so the
Wagner
my
group
DMs
every time I turn around, got my wife looking over my shoulder.
Is Diallo stalling? Is this a debate tack in the stall so you can just run the clock out and shit? That's what he doing.
I'm just saying.
Anyway, can you please present your evidence or the way you come to a conclusion about how you feel about the Wagner group? So far, it sounds like what the Guardian has put out. The Guardian say the Wagner group is taking advantage of this situation and blah blah blah.
I have to say, I got to come with my conclusion. I'll say like Dr. John Henry Clark said, anyone on the soil of Africa that can't be addressed as an African is an invader without exception. Nobody came to Africa to serve from outside of Africa to serve Africa's interest. And when we were having a discussion in the DMs, it went down in the DMs, but I mean, I'm not saying you took a position. It's just you brought up an idea and you said, well, maybe it could be an equal partnership between Russia and the Sahel nations. And I said, are there any armed militia, any armed Africans on the streets of Russia? Because we got armed Russians with military grade weapons walking the streets and patrolling the streets of Africa. But allow me, I'm almost done. And if you find an African with a slingshot in Moscow, he will be taken down.
Diallo.
And so, no, it's not equal.
Slow down 1 second. So
not equal, as I was taught in elementary math, it's not an equal relationship. And now I'm done.
You don't have quotes. So John Henry Clark also said that we don't have permanent friends, or we don't have friends, but we can have permanent allies or permanent interests. We have permanent.
He said that we have no friends. That's
that's fine.
Let me just say
we don't need friends, but we can have.
We have no friends, and then he said there's no such thing as permanent allies, only permanent interest.
Okay.
So those are two separate statements that feed into each other. But
so again, if people have two different, if they have the same interests, then they can work together without being friends.
What are the common interests?
What common interests?
Between the Russian Federation, and I said this last week, and everybody was like, nobody thinks that. But I'm hearing a lot of confusion and overlap between the Soviet Union and the Russian Federation, which are two different seats of power. When I hear people making statements justifying or defending the Russian impact or presence in this larger arena or theater of conflict.
All right.
And people are always talking about what the Russians did in Africa in the past.
Right.
And when they talking about what the Soviet Union did, not what the Russian Federation has done. Those are two different. The Soviet Union is gone. So you can't you can't connect these two. They're not the same.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Erica, and then Ajamu.
Well, one, I think the question about African militia in Russia is it's ridiculous, Diallo. I'm sorry, because again, that points me to the 1-to-1. In what way? Why would Russia need African militias there? I mean,
do you want me to answer that question, or is that just a rhetorical question?
Not hurt. If sanctions have not done a thing to Russia because of the infrastructure that Russia has, because of so what would be the need for Africa to have militias? But that's rhetorical.
Okay, it's rhetorical because I could answer that. I could answer that. But yeah, it does sound ridiculous.
Because the
do that, Geechee. Chill out. But it does sound. I agree.
No,
it does
I'm
sound
trying to let people
ridiculous
finish.
to have armed Africans in Russia, but I also think it's ridiculous to have armed Russians in Africa. They both seem ridiculous to me.
But this is the conflations that you keep making. The situation, the material conditions in Africa, especially in the Sahel right now, call for allyship, call for support, and it's not just coming from Russia. There's relationships being built. The multipolar world that's being built currently is inviting these different relationships. So strategically, Russia, well, I think that we need to have some clarity on Wagner Group and the Russian Federation, because I think there's conflation happening with that's not good either. But strategically, Russia's use and help right now is useful for where Africa is trying to go. Africa's not free. Africa's not free. Africa suffers under comprador class. Africa suffers under neocolonialism. Africa has flag independence. What African nation has total independence? And that's what they're trying to achieve. So if they're placing their bets with the East rather than the West, that is a strategic thing. And also, geopolitics is not altruistic. Everybody's not supposed to be out here singing Kumbaya and we're all friends. That's not geopolitics. Geopolitics is strategic. Again, objective, strategies, tactics. These words are important because these words speak to what we're trying to do and how we're trying to achieve what we're trying to do. So if they're clear about what they want to do, what you already told Russia, he told Putin, thank you for the wheat, thank you for the tons of wheat. But if you see us back here next year, something wrong with us. Because he's saying that to say we have an objective. This is where we're trying to be. We're trying to be independent of both East and West eventually. So hopefully we don't have to come back here. But in the meantime, we understand that we need this to get to where we're going. And I think, again, this is the emphasizing of African people. Like, nobody is expecting were thinking that they have some sort of alignment or some sort of mystical relationship with Russia or even the Soviet Union. In the last 20 years, Russia has been a partner to African nations, especially on the UN Security Council, especially in terms of sanctions. So I don't think there's any confusion about them thinking they're still aligned with the Soviet Union. I think when we talk about historically why Africa would have these sentiments, we would bring up the Soviet Union. But currently, Russia has been a friend to African nations in terms of helping them reach where they're trying to go. And I think that this whole idea of we had no friends or all of that just kind of skews the what geopolitics actually is. And it's not an altruistic thing. I don't think we should be confusing ourselves that this is some type of we are the world situation, especially when we are at war.
So real quick, there in the second half, we're gonna play some Umar Johnson clips, and ironically, Umar sound like the argument that Diallo's making. Umar makes that same argument, so it's gonna be interesting there. But Jumbo, go ahead.
Well, look, I think that Sister Erica kind of laid out everything that I would have tried to comment on. That this is not a game. It's a serious situation, and people's ability to survive, the continuity or whatever's developing in the Sahel is threatened with this decision to militarily invade, go into Niger. And these African states have to make certain kinds of decisions. If there's not the possibility of providing some kind of material support for what is going to be a multinational attack on their process, then they might as well just go ahead and just throw down their weapons and give up. So these are people who are making strategic decisions based on what their best understanding of their realities and how they survive their processes. There's a certain danger, and I keep on coming back to this. One thing about being a revolutionary and being an organizer is that the one thing that we stress over and over again, we have to be humble, okay? Because sometimes there's a danger when we know more than what we think we know, and we don't hear, we don't listen. And that is when you make political errors. We can't make errors. We're going to make them because we're human, but we can't make errors based on what we think is some kind of abstract formula, based on what we think is sort of an absolute reality that can't be altered based on the realities that we are trying to analyze and perhaps even transform. So what we saw and what we heard with the analysis Sister Erica laid out is exactly what we're trying to achieve within the context of the Black Alliance for Peace. She laid out a critical analysis of where those states are and the potential role of a Russia, while simultaneously within the confines of the Black Alliance of Peace, we were just debating last week. We started talking about, again, understanding where the Russian Federation is coming from, because we don't deal with fantasies and romanticism. We understand that these states have their own particular interests, and so as the Russians are involved on the African continent, we want to make sure our folks keep aware of all of the contradictions. We don't engage in romanticisms. We don't engage in personality. We engage in objective, concrete analysis, okay? And we challenge ourselves because, again, we can't afford to make too many mistakes, all right? So this is where we are, Africans. I mean, this notion that we can't make a certain kind of analysis because we're in the African diaspora, again, doesn't reflect or it's not an understanding of the kind of structures that are being built. We have a U.S. out of Africa network that has membership across 4 different continents with a significant base on the African continent, okay? And that is what feeds into our analysis. When you want to understand some of these complex issues, where do you go? You go 2 places, basically, if you're talking about a radical Black analysis, but 3 places. You go to Hood Communists, you go to the Black Alliance for Peace, and you go to the Black Agenda Report, okay? We're not coming off the top, Africans. This is serious shit. We've got to ground out. We make mistakes, of course, and we may even get it wrong, but we can't come off the top. We've got to really ground ourselves because the masses of our people depend on that. And that's all I'm saying. That basically we've got to be serious. We got to, quit smelling ourselves and understand that basically it's all about trying to understand this collectively. And no one is going to be perfect and no one's going to be right 100% of the time.
So I was just accused for not letting LL Cool J land the plane. So Diallo, if there's a plane you need to land that I cut you off, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to hear everybody, but go ahead and land the plane or make your statement or response.
I think I've articulated my positions on coup d'etats, Russian allyship, and the overall trajectory. I think there are forces in the ground. If the military government, if the military dictatorship does hold true that they will return to civilian governance and that they
it became a dictatorship.
Were they elected to power? I'm just going off the facts. What do you call it?
That's liberalism, African.
What do you call it? Okay, you don't like my term. I'll use yours. What's your term for it?
Erica, would you not call that like a dictatorship?
What is it called?
Your definition? Because again,
what's it called? Because I can't cheerlead for this stuff. Tell me what it is. What's the term for when someone comes to power through military force and controls the apparatus of the state?
Yes, the question is clear, Diallo, so you don't have to ask it again. But what I'm saying is, when we use the word dictatorship, as Erica talked about, we had conversation about, it doesn't necessarily mean something bad. That means they're in control, right?
There's some good dictatorships.
Brother Diallo made an argument last week. Brother Diallo made an argument last week that the only route to power was through guerrilla force.
Right.
A military takeover of the state.
Which is
a guerrilla is not a military. It's a guerrilla force.
It is a military force, okay?
The guerrilla is
Africa,
actually
you're operating from a liberal framework, okay?
Okay, fine. Call it a liberal framework. I only care about whether I'm accurate or inaccurate. What other labels you apply to it.
You're always going to be
please
accurate,
tell me
Diallo, because
what is the accurate
else.
term to call it? What is it?
Okay, so they can.
What is it? If it's not a military dictatorship, what is it?
Okay,
in the case of Burkina Faso, it is an expression of the popular aspirations of the masses right now, in institutional form. What that form might take in another week or two, or a month, or whatever, it really depends.
So
on
the word for that form of governance,
we don't impose
Stop muting
from the
me,
outside. We don't impose from the outside some kind of formula in terms of how you bring about these kinds of changes. Right now,
can you tell me, is there a term? So you're saying the term doesn't exist?
I'm saying there's no objective term. No, that's what I'm saying. That basically what is not.
Then I'm going to give it a term. As I was saying, the term is not a dictatorship,
like the dictatorship we have in the U.S. A capitalist
United States does not qualify as a dictatorship.
There you see, folks. Now we're going where we need to go.
Yeah.
U.S. is nothing but a capitalist dictatorship. Okay, the U.S. state is an expression.
So we just using words we don't like against those we do like.
No. We can break it down to Africa.
We using the terms, and we just going to apply terms as we see fit.
You got to study some more. You don't know as much as you think you know, my brother.
Fine. That's why I asked you what the term is. I have no problems. I love learning. Please educate me. But I didn't get. He said there's no answer. There's no word. Am I wrong? What did I miss?
No,
what was the answer I got, Geechee?
That's the answer.
What?
The answer that he gave you. That's the answer.
That there's no term.
That's the answer.
Right now,
yes.
No. They're in a transition.
So there is no answer.
They're in a transition. There is no
All right.
Who's determining governmental policy right now? Who's making legislative?
The people through their institutional expression reflected right now in the military.
When the military makes a decision, the people go to the military and say, "Hey, this is what we want," and then that goes up the chain of command, and they're executing what the people tell them to do in real time?
Right now, it seems to be in Burkina Faso, at least.
Okay.
They are developing structures right now, popular structures that have a democratic character. Now, that's not happening yet in Niger because it's still a relatively new phenomenon. Okay.
Okay.
But what we see in Guinea, in Burkina Faso,
okay.
what we are seeing developing in Guinea, these are different kind of processes. You got to study the specificities of these national projects. You can't come abstractly African, or you make errors in your analysis.
I'm trying to be as direct as possible. I call it what I see it as, and if what I call it is incorrect, I'm happy to be corrected. So, but I mean, I don't think saying, well, there's no word for it because we don't want to call it. We don't want to call it what it is. So let's just pretend we don't have a word for what's happening.
Africa, because your position is a dictatorship, and we say it's not, doesn't mean that we're just avoiding the issue. It ain't. You can't just assert. Make an assertion, and that basically represents reality. No, we saying
is it a democratic government? Is it a democratic government?
You saying the U.S. is the democratic government? That's what you said, though, right? You said
I don't want to define anything. I just want to use the words as they stand.
You said the U.S. is a democratic government. That's what you said.
No, I didn't say that. I said, are the governments that I incorrectly call dictatorships, the ones that I incorrectly called dictatorships, are they democratic?
It was a Cuban revolution a dictatorship? Or
no. Please answer the question directly.
Yeah, look, I'm gonna answer directly because basically
the answer is no, but you don't want to say no.
The answer is this: that basically we've got to be careful with liberalism because the bourgeoisie.
I'll be careful with it. But you don't want to. Okay, let me ask the second question then.
The bourgeoisie said. The bourgeoisie said that the coming to power in Cuba represented a dictatorship because it wasn't a democratic.
The bourgeoisie's not here. It's just me and you. Okay. So okay, that's your answer to that. Your answer to that is a deflection to Cuba. Here's the second question. Is it a civilian government?
Are these the characteristics of a democracy?
I'm not asking about the characteristics of democracy. I'm asking of the characteristics of the Sahel, of the Sahel nations that have experienced military coups. Now, I'm trying to get to since we don't have a term for the current, right now form of government. Looking forward, I'm happy to look forward. I'm happy to learn from the past. But right now, just looking in today, as our brothers and sisters wake up in the Sahel region, what form of governance are they operating under?
They're operating under a transitional process. They're operating under a transitional process right now. How that might look remains to be seen. It's a process.
But can we call it what it is?
No, we can't call it what it is because it's a dialectical process. You can't freeze reality like that. That is, again, a liberal kind of metaphysical kind of perspective.
Absolutely.
It doesn't work like that, my brother. This is a dynamic process. It could turn and continue to go toward a left project and be revolutionary, or, and as you said, correctly said, it can end up being to the right. It really depends, okay? Depends on how this process unfolds.
All right. So yeah. So I don't know if I even want to finish. I think we kind of touched some topics. I think I had one more question, but it seems like that would get into another spat. But so if there was this, yeah, so maybe this is more of a question that could be role playing or real. So you have U.S. military or anybody in the NATO military as a
why y'all?
I mean, I don't know why Diallo pulling it up. Like, I think he whenever I start talking, whenever I start talking, he like to just do the intervening, ironically.
Hey, don't even give me a gun. You go ahead, Geisha.
Obviously,
go off.
I keep muting
as if comments don't come up under me when I'm talking, but you go ahead, dude.
But do I interrupt while I'm talking, or I use it as a segue to say something else? So when I have a comment up, I'm not starting to say,
right.
What's happening right here in the comments?
When I do it,
but anyway,
it's cool, man. It's a problem when I do it.
It's
cool when Geechee do it. It's a problem when I do it.
Y'all got Y'all know that,
Right.
right?
Hey, what would you say?
In Africa, I'm gonna have to leave though in 1 minute.
No, so quick question. So you have black people in the U.S. military, you have black people in other NATO militaries, and they have some type of questions. They're being confused or whatever. What are some words or some thoughts you would share with them, especially about this situation in the Sahel? Again, this could be your family members or people that you know, but black military people who are hearing these things and they want to be aware of what's going on. Each three of y'all tell me.
If I can go first, because I'm at the jump. We in the Black Alliance of Peace, we absolutely clear. We say not one drop of blood to defend the capitalist dictatorship in the U.S. And we clear about the nature of what we have in the U.S. as a capitalist dictatorship. So we say to the young Africans, we understand, because I was in the military, okay, and we understand why you may be there. But, we got to get access to these young Africans so that they are not going out and defending this settler colonial project with their lives. We say, no, you don't fight for this system and this state. So that's what we say to them, that basically you're being sent on the African continent because they're already increasing the troops. Don't take up arms against any African. Do what Glenn Ford did in 1968 when they sent the 82nd Airborne into D.C. And they made a pact among themselves that they were not going to raise their weapons against African people in that city. So that's the kind of consciousness we've got to build, but we can't get access to these folks to keep them isolated. But our position objectively is, no, we don't fight for the system. And the very fact that the U.S. is galvanizing invasion force, it says that whatever the nature of that project is in Niger and Burkina Faso, is opposed to the U.S. And I'll come from a very simple position. Any play, and it may be knee-jerk anti-imperialism. If the U.S. is on one side, I'm on the other.
Thank you. So, Erica Diallo, what would you say to a black military person that you know, family member, whoever, especially as it pertains to this topic?
Abscond, go AWOL immediately, post haste, and steal all the staplers and ammunition you can get away with. Do like that dude that ran to North Korea. Get out of Dodge. Abscond. Don't enlist. And if you have enlisted, abscond.
Yeah, peace, Jamal. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamal.
I honestly don't really engage my military family around these questions because they all think that I'm in imminent danger. Being in places like Cuba and Nicaragua, they're more worried for my safety than their own being in the military. So they already have these warped ideas about these nations, these countries, obviously, because they're, indoctrinated. So we really don't have much conversations about this because they already come with their ideas. I do talk to like my nieces and nephews about enlisting. Like my best friend, she's moving to LA. My godson just graduated. He doesn't know what to do. I completely intervened in the do not go into the military thing, gave them all this information. So I really do try to intervene before they get in there. But once they get in there, I find it like a little more difficult to have those conversations around any of this.
So we had the Prince of the Prince of Pan-African Panhandling. He was able to, give his claims and give his thoughts about what he feel about the situation. I'm gonna let this clip play and then y'all respond to it. But I'm saying, if he sounds like Diallo a little bit, I warned you.
To President Ibrahim, General Chiani, General Dumboya, and General Goita. What is going to be our plan to stop the Arab countries from the north from invading your territory? What are we going to do about Libya, Morocco, the other Arab states that are just above you? I understand you're still fighting Islamic militants. Are we sure these Islamic militants aren't being financed by the CIA, French government, or British MI6? What is your plan to crush once and for all the Islamic militants who are threatening to take over your independent countries. We need to know what is the plan to crush the Islamic insurrection. We're not against Islam. We're not against Islam. We're not against Islam. We're against those insurgents who are using the religion to disguise their evil, selfish, and wicked agendas. What is going to be the plan in order to crush the Islamic insurgency that is threatening the independence of Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Guinea? What is the solution? But another question I have for you four brothers. What deals are you making with China and Russia that the people don't know about? Don't tell me you overthrew the previous leader to make the same mistakes that he made in Guinea. Do not go into debt to Russia, China, or India. They are not your friends. If you go into debt to Russia, China, and India, you are no longer a revolutionary. You are a puppet. I hope you're listening to me, President Dumboya. I hope you're listening to me, General Goita. I hope you're listening to me, General Chiani. I hope you're listening to me, young President Ibrahim Traore. If you take the money from China, if you take too much assistance from Russia, if you take too many handouts from India, you become their slave. You become their slave. I'm not saying you can't do business with them. I'm not saying you can't do business. You may have to do business because your country has immediate needs before you can get yourself back up on your feet. I know you will have to do some business with India, Russia, and China. I understand. But what I'm saying is don't sign any deals that are going to be so deep, so long in their history, that you will not be able to cut the umbilical cord to the Chinese neo-colonizer, the Russian neo-colonizer, the Indian neo-colonizer. Russia don't give a damn about Africa. Russia don't like Africa no more than China. And China don't like African people no more than the United States. Everybody in Africa who is not a Black African is an invader or the descendant of one. I said everybody in Africa who is not a Black African is either an invader or a descendant of one.
Thoughts, response to the Prince of Pan-African panhandling. Diallo, Erica, go first. Go ahead.
That's that emphasizing, right? Umar, who has no significant projects here, who's a grifter, who has developed nothing, has done nothing, has organized nothing, is sending messages to leadership about what they should and should not do. So I just think that that's more that sort of condescending Western chauvinism.
I mean, he did offer to open his Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy over there in Burkina Faso, so he did offer that. But go ahead, Diallo. LL Cool J.
I think we should speak to what he said. You know, I'm all for ad hominem. I mean, I think that I do agree. I stand in stark opposition to Umar and what he represents, and I have to say I was offended that you said that he said the same things that I said. But to address the merits of what he's saying, I think it's a pretty absurdist question to ask him about what they're going to do about the Islamic insurgents. And we know that the so-called Islamic insurgents are basically CIA proxies. You know, they're the primary victims of the Islamic insurgents are other Muslims. These are proxy forces that are directed, armed, equipped, and given coverage. So the United States is not fighting Islamic extremism; it's fueling it. So and many of those North African militaries who have taken dictatorial power over nations have, you know, got their stripes. So I think it's it's not a legitimate question to ask them what they're going to do, because they've been fighting them. They've been in opposition to them. And they've even would say there was a thing going on in Africa, going back as far as the Bush administration, where Africans as far and wide from Kenya to Nigeria were saying, fight Americans in America, fight Americans in America, meaning that these Islamic forces that claim they're against the great Satan of the West, how come you fighting everywhere but the West?
and the body count is being stacked up everywhere but the places you claim to be fighting. So I don't think that's a legitimate question to ask them. You know, if anything, you could say, or you could say you don't agree with their tactics for fighting the hordes, and even to call them Islamic terrorists when they're really, you know, CIA proxies. I don't think that's fair. As far as his statements on going into debt, I think as much as I stand in opposition to him, Russia, the Russian Federation, not the Soviet Union, the Russian Federation, the nation of India, and China do have a solid publicly documented track record. Their leaders have made comments about Africa and Africans. They have solid projects on the ground. They have investments on the ground. They have extractive industries on the ground. So I think that what we use to predict the trajectory of these relationships is not necessarily what's being told to us as opposed to what has been done. I think what people say is a less of a reliable indicator versus what people do. And we all know that.
Mm-hmm.
So what has India, China, and Russia, and I'm glad that that Umar brought in India and China, and especially India's impact. So, and with their Hindu nationalism and their right-wing reactionary, Russia is just not an ally of Africans. Russia is in Africa for its own purposes. Russia pivoted to Africa for very specific and clear reasons. And I don't think that Africa, too many proxy wars between white powers have been fought on African soil. And I don't want things to go that way again. And there's an old saying, when the lion and the leopard go to war, who should the antelope root for? You know.
Go ahead, Erica, you had to respond?
Yeah, I don't disagree too much with Diallo being said. I do think that we need to be, again, dialectical about how we analyze these relationships. These, I think there is some sort of maybe confusion around how these relationships should interact or should proceed in terms of looking at friendly relations. I can't stress enough that that's not the foundation of geopolitics, especially when we look at the advancement, the spread of Western hegemony, and how these nations have and continue to align through a common enemy. Now, does that mean that everyone is not in it for their own interests? Certainly. And to say that Russia has its own interests is not to say that African nations don't as well. And I think that that is what we should sort of prioritize, that African nations do have their own interests and they do have their own strategies. And they are using these nations as much as, or probably more than they are being used. Because it's a relationship that's not, I mean, it's especially in terms of like what you talk about exploitive relationships and extractivism, and there's no consideration to what the West has done and why a China would be brought in and why a Russia would be brought in. But this is not to say that all of these relationships, there's not criticisms to be made or valid criticisms, but it is to say that we need to understand these things more broadly on a dialectical terms. And then also I do agree with Diallo in terms of we can't just look at the now, we have to look at the past. But then I also want to raise something Nkrumah said in Conscientism, when he talks really that no one can act in either the past or the future. We really do have to. He says all actions without exception happen in the present. So to the extent that revolution is the action, the revolution is now. So it says that yes, we should consider what happened in the past to inform how we think things would happen in the future, but we do have to be grounded in what's actually happening now, which I think it's really important in terms of how we analyze China, Russia, and Iran. Surprisingly, it's growing it has a growing relationship in the Sahel. But I think
why does keep coming up? I don't,
because it's probably the same way ignorance is bliss keeps coming up. It's like a quick, easy thing to say to like dismiss what people are saying in terms of these geopolitical relationships. But I think when we look at the African nations in terms of like Russia, it's not hard to understand that they are looking at what Russia has done in Syria and saying, we should place our bets there in terms of how are we going to be able to break away from the West? What is Russia doing currently? And so you can look at what Russia's role in Syria is, and then it makes more sense why they would be invited. And then again, the paternalism around it. When I can say it again, when Putin just gave hundreds of tons, right, of wheat to African nations. And each of these nations are under no confusion about their relationship with Russia and what they have to do for their own nations. But ultimately, I think most of what Umar is speaking to or was attempting to speak to is really, I guess, what we see happening in general, especially online. I think that people who have a passing interest in Africa, who look at Africa through headlines, would quickly grab onto these things because debt trap, it could be debunked 100 million times and you would always hear Chinese debt trap, right? Because it's still headline news in Western media. It's still being pushed as a thing. So it could be countlessly debunked, but I think that when you have a passing interest in the continent, then you don't really know what's happening state to state. You don't understand these individual relationships and partnerships that are being dealt with. And then you don't understand that China as a nation is dealing with the heads of other nations, right? That may or may not be in the best interest of the masses. So that's an issue of a comprador class that needs to be defeated by the African masses of that nation. So what does that struggle look like? And so these are things that people are not really actually engaging, but are engaging the headlines. This is why we are always hearing about the Wagner Group consistently, especially in the last 2 years. This is why we're always hearing about Chinese debt traps, et cetera, et cetera. But we're never hearing, there's no information or no general information that you could easily pull on AFRICOM. We have no idea how many bases are on the continent. We have no idea how many military operations exist because all of that is not headline news until something like this happens in Nigeria.
So Diallo, it seems like you are in agreement with the what's that guy named Umar's foreign policy and his geopolitic analysis, but what about his domestic?
I do not agree with Umar's foreign policy or analysis. No. Umar is a reactionary.
Okay.
Umar is a right-wing status quo reactionary. He does not have a revolutionary analysis. I said I appreciate the fact that he's articulating skepticism and bringing up China, India, and Russia. I can appreciate that. But no, I think that Umar often misdirects. Like I said, just for him to ask people who have spent decades and shed blood fighting the insurgents or the terrorists, whatever you want a terminology for them, but they're CIA proxies. Those so-called Islamic terrorists are CIA proxies, and it's just been exposed too many times to even go into it. To ask them what they're going to do about it when they've been dealing with it, and him bringing up the fact that these other countries and not to go in debt. I mean, that's pretty. I don't think you say something that pretty much most people would agree with, regardless of what side they fall on this issue. That's what we call low-hanging fruit. So, and he's a populist and says popular things, even though his ultimate agendas are reactionary and reinforce unjust hierarchies.
So what about his domestic policies? We see him, snuggle up with Sukiana, that's her name. And you said he entered into some right-wing.
Yeah, he's some anti-immigration, anti-refugee rhetoric. I mean, I don't really know. I can't say I comprehend his outreach to Sukiana. I'm not sure if he's trying to rebrand or is it just another, it's trending. There's a lot of sisters out here in the streets that he could have so-called reached out to. I'm not sure what his purpose or reasoning, because Sukiana had a hot song and eating and a meme and a TikTok viral sensation. I think that was more of his motivation for reaching out to her, as opposed to having any real purpose for dialogue or reaching common ground. But he, Senator, he talked about here in the state of Illinois, the governor, who I voted for, the governor has basically allowed for people who are not citizens, immigrants, to become policemen and to join the police force and other policing agencies in the United States. And he said that the reason for them to allow that is to destroy Black people. And it was one of the most absurdist leaps in logic. He did not articulate anything about the details of the policy. And basically, it stated that anyone who has legal status and standing and who is legally situated to work in the United States can also join the police force. So every day you go out and receive services and interact with people from Latin America and the African continent, many physicians, many tech professionals, many healthcare, other healthcare, allied health professionals. They're not U.S. citizens. They just have a legal right to work in the United States. I have a cousin who works overseas, and she's not a citizen of the nation where she works, but she has legal right to work there. And so they just basically said that it doesn't make sense that policing and law enforcement is exempt for that. Now, I don't think anybody should be the police. I support police abolition ultimately and police defunding towards that goal. So, I could agree with Umar if he was making a uniform denunciation of the police, but to fuel more of this nativist, U.S. American nationalist ADOS rhetoric about the foreign forces coming here to harm us and things of that nature, I don't agree with, and the record doesn't support that.
I don't know if people watching this on the delay, but somebody said, "Don't do that, Geechee." I don't know what I'm doing. I wasn't even talking, but I don't know. So any thoughts on that, Eric? I know you got a hard stop at 10 before we dive into our wealth tour.
No, I don't. I try not to give too much thoughts on Umar, honestly. I don't know. I think he's a grifter. I remember initially Umar started from a big fan base of Black women. My first seeing of Umar, he was a love doctor on Real Housewives of Atlanta. So he had a guest spot on that show. So that was my introduction. So all of these other things are new to me in terms of like the Prince of Pan-Africanism and all of that. So it just seems like he grifts from one branding to another. And I guess foreign policy is his next sort of grift, and that's why he's doing it. But I think in terms of Sukihana, he's always sort of had like a popular Black woman base. Maybe he's trying to rebuild that because that was where a lot of the funding was coming from for that school, was Black women. But I don't really have too much to give to Umar. I try not to, like, I know you and I have discussed it. I try not to like debate shit that don't matter. I do understand, like, people have a reach, so to speak, and he is entertaining. And I did get sent his Breakfast Club interview by someone who said, I think he has good points. So I get that there's probably a need to dismantle a lot of the things that he's saying, but I think that there's like more pressing issues than a Umar. But to your point, Diallo, about the mayor, I did not know that, or the new, is it the mayor of Chicago or the governor of Chicago?
The governor.
Okay, I did not know that was happening, but I'm not too surprised with seeing the trajectory.
Well, the reason they did it is because they're having a lot of trouble with recruitment. Ultimately, it's a positive sign if we were stretched the logic here, because the only reason they did it is because they went on a minority recruitment campaign, and several cops here are committing suicide. The police have a very high suicide rate, and a lot of people are resigning from the Chicago, mainly the Chicago Police Department. They're having very serious issues with getting people to join the police, and they were under a consent decree under the Obama administration, and then Trump, of course, lifted it. But basically, being a cop in the city of Chicago is not a flex, and so it's the fact that they would open this up. I'm not foolish enough to think that they want to include refugees and immigrants and undocumented people. I know this isn't to reach out to them. This is a desperation on their part to maintain the policing infrastructure because of they have and now we have a mayor who they have deemed hostile to the police, and that the Chicago Police Department said that if Mayor Brandon Johnson was elected, there would be blood in the streets. And so the executive branch is of the city, of the local city government here, is in very antagonistic, or the police have started beef with them. I don't think that Mayor Brandon Johnson is actually hostile to the police, unfortunately, but they consider anything than absolute capitulation to all of their demands hostile. So really, this policy, again, is actually, there's a silver lining there, meaning they're desperate for cops because nobody wants to be a cop in the city of Chicago.
There's a solution, though. So your boy Steph Curry, he's a Brandon genius. He has a Brandon.
God damn it, I should have worn my Steph Curry jersey today.
I mean, he's a Brandon icon. I mean, he talks about how he build brands. Not that he's being used by the brands, but he building brands. But because he's able to build brands, him and that little guy there, they're going on a wealth tour. And the wealth tour is coming to your city, Diallo. So
I'll be there. What is wealth tour? Is he gonna give us money?
Well, that, you know, you a little bit
I'll be there right in line.
So you're a little bit too fast.
I'll be right.
What you say?
Kevin Hart is so little in that picture.
He's about to go out there and make it rain.
But the thing is, this is Chase's plan, right? But Chase said for the first 2 or 3 years, they just gonna give y'all some education and inspiration, and then the money gonna come.
God damn it!
So you can't really wait for, you know, I'm sorry, you can't be so ahead of the curve and, you know, asking to get the money. But I want to play this clip. I know y'all probably seen this clip 1,000 times, but anytime I see black people work with Chase, these black celebrities, I'm always eager to show people this clip of
Earn Your Leisure with them now, right?
Oh yeah, they all over the place with them. Earn Your Leisure, and matter of fact, Ian Dunlap and Steph Curry is the headliner for the one. I don't know if it's in Oakland or Chicago, but this is a clip of Chase's president or CEO, Diamond. And I always show people this whenever they say anything about Chase. So I know y'all saw this, but I want to play it again.
Was this woman had, and I apologize, you're going to need to follow orally. She had $2,425 a month. She rents a 1-bedroom apartment. She and her daughter sleep together in the same room. In Irvine, California, that average 1-bedroom apartment is going to be $1,600. She spends $100 on utilities. Take away the $1,700, and she has net $725. She's like me. She drives a 2008 minivan and has gas, $400 for car expenses and gas. The Department of Agriculture says a low-cost food budget, that is ramen noodles, a low food budget is $400. That leaves her $77 in the red. She has a Cricket cell phone, the cheapest cell phone she can get for $40. She's in the red $117 a month. She has after-school childcare because the bank is open during normal business hours. That's $450 a month. That takes her down to negative $567 per month. My question for you, Mr. Diamond, is how should she manage this budget shortfall while she's working full-time at your bank?
I don't know that all your numbers are accurate. That number is generally a starter job.
She is a starting employee. She has a 6-year-old child. This is her first job.
And you can get those jobs at a high school, and she may have my job one day. So
she may, but Mr. Diamond, she doesn't have the ability to spend your $31 million.
I'm totally sympathetic.
She's short 567. What would you suggest she do?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
Would you recommend that she take out a JP Morgan Chase credit card and run a deficit?
I don't know. I'd have to think about it.
Would you recommend that she overdraft at your bank and be charged overdraft fees?
I don't know. I'd have to think about it.
So I know you have a lot of...
I'd love to call her up and have a conversation about her financial affairs and see if we can be helpful.
See if you can find a way for her to live on less than the minimum that I've described.
Just be helpful.
Well, I appreciate your desire to be helpful, but what I'd like you to do is provide a way for families to make ends meet so that little kids who are 6 years old living in a one-bedroom apartment with their mother aren't going hungry at night because they're $567 short from feeding themselves, clothing them. We allow no money for clothing. We allow no money for school lunches. We allow no money for field trips, no money for medical, no money for prescription drugs, nothing. And she's short $567 already.
So when you hear that, and you hear Black people teaming up with Chase to come and teach other Black people about financial literacy and how they should learn how to work the money. And again, Steph Curry is presenting himself as his intelligence got him to where he's at. Not that he can hoop, right? LeBron said he saved his way to billions of dollars. Not that he can hoop, but what's your first thoughts when you see Jamie?
I think we should accept the fact that ball chasing is not, like I said, I was genuinely shocked years ago when I found out that Jordan has given away more money to charity than he earned throughout his entire NBA career. So that ball chasing money ain't where, that's not where the what do y'all curse breaking multi-generational wealth resides. So I think we do focus quite a bit on them getting big checks, but in under capitalism, as we see, getting wealth is one thing. Chasing balls, a wicked jump shot will get you to riches, but to sustain wealth, to sustain wealth, to go from a businessman to a businessman, to get Jay-Z or Jordan money, you have to engage with the system different than simply, putting yourself out there and be a high income earner. That's when these people start to align with JP Morgan, Boeing and Hewlett Packard and these other multinational corporations and interests. So we often overlook what it means to sustain wealth because so many of us operate on deficit, and we're just figuring out how do you get money before you get to the side. And that's where these people become active class enemies, where they have to, by nature of their status, to maintain their status in the system, they have to actively act against the best interests of the Black masses. So they can't.
So basically, you say you're going to the event, the Advancing Wealth.
No, you said he's not giving out money. I don't need inspiration, but if he ever show up to give out money, I'll be there. I'll be there. Yeah, hell yeah, I'll be there. If he was just giving out wealth, if he was giving out bundles of cash, I'd show up and get that shit.
I want to thank you both. I really do have to stop. Zion is screaming at me from behind the door here. But I do thank y'all. I do want folks to know that I met Diallo in Atlanta. Diallo is a very nice person, a very gentle person.
Why
He's mad at you on this screen sometimes because he don't know how to lose an argument or concede. But it's cool.
I'm not nice. Right. I have a very
he's a very
intimidating aura.
He's a tall.
Delete that footage. Oh. Nope. People are in awe. Like what did Gully say? I come on the corner and people run away from the corner.
All right, thank you, brothers.
I appreciate it.
All right, sis.
Until next time. When you think about this little tour they got going on, so Chase actually promised, and I want your thoughts on this. Chase actually promised to give a certain amount of money to I guess the Black community, advancing Black pathways, but they have 7 points of interest, right? And this goes into the DEI and the DNI. The 7 interests is advancing Black pathways, and even the name sound weird. Advancing Black pathways, advancing Hispanic and Latinos, Office of Asian and Pacific Islanders Affairs, Office of Disability Inclusion, Military and Veteran Affairs, Office of LGBT plus Affairs, and Women's on the Move. Like those are their 7 areas that they're going to throw the same type of programs and money at. But for some reason, Black people think, oh, they're giving us money and that's us, and we about to advance Black pathways to getting wealth, or we're going to close the racial wealth gap. But again, they mentioned that they're going to be doing the same thing for all 7 of those groups, right? Like the veterans, the military veterans are marginalized groups as well. What are your thoughts about that when you see that, one, they are actually helping all these different marginalized groups?
Listen, capitalism is a cult, and they have they're missionaries, and they have to evangelize the masses. So the previous system that fell, that collapsed, gave the masses of the people no illusion that the mercantile and monarchical systems of the past that capitalism metastasized from gave no illusions to the workers and that they could elevate within the systems. So that system eventually fell. And as they refined and came back with another justified theft, a justified region where a few parasitic individuals can dominate the wealth generated by the larger group, they came up with this capitalism. And one component of capitalism that makes it so hard to upend is that it constantly preaches the illusion that anybody can get rich and anybody can come up in this piece. And people are very susceptible. It's a very, attractive illusion. And they have these capitalist missionaries, these capitalist success stories. And their job is to go out there and perpetuate, because when you look at a black person and you say, well, let's say black people secured reparations, that there was a just and equitable distribution of resources and wealth. Would this black individual benefit, or would they be harmed in terms of their economics? Would they gain or lose? And if you look at a black person and you say, well, if economic justice did emerge, if socialism did emerge, would this individual gain or lose? If you can conclude that they would lose, you have to look at them as a class enemy. And that's just the bottom line of it. So this is evangelism. It's evangelism. And because they have charts and graphs and technical terminologies and universities that teach economics, we tend to overlook the fact that this is basically the same hustle that your church runs. They selling pipe dreams.
I mean, your cousin, the culture top thought leader, said that he's teaching economic literacy instead of financial literacy. And even the idea.
Who said that? Who you talking about?
Your cousin. You look like him today. What's the 19 Keys? Your homeboy.
Oh,
he said he's.
I wish I had him. Man, listen.
He's teaching
all
economic
I need
literacy
is
instead of financial
Elijah
literacy.
Muhammad, cult leader Kufi, man, and I think I could really take off.
But so one of the things that I'm always frustrated in seeing, that when people think about this wealth gap and they think about banks closing the wealth gaps. Now, these banks are giving advice, coaching, inspiration, and a little bit of money through loans to marginalized people. And somehow that's going to close the racial wealth gap. Like loans, not money, but loans that they give you 20,000, you pay them back 35,000.
But it's not a wealth gap. It's an imperialism gap. It's a slavery gap. It's an oppression and genocide gap. That's the thing. We love to see the gap. We love to look at the distance between the racial wealth gap between blacks and whites, but we never look down into that chasm and see the pile of bodies. Mm-hmm. And I never hear these gurus. I never hear these gurus explain how the rich got rich. They don't tell us to do what the rich do. I would have more respect for these gurus if they came out and told the poor masses how to actually get rich, where wealth actually comes from.
Well, that's what they claim they're doing, though.
But they're not, though. They're not, though. Where is the literacy? Like I said a few weeks ago, you go to a starving person and you give them a cookbook. That's not nutritional literacy. You know what I'm saying? That's not nutritional literacy. So if people don't have resources or they lack resources and you're telling them about literacy instead of actually taking resources and giving it to them, redistributing the wealth, then you're playing games. You're helping to sustain the unjust hierarchy that led to this shit.
Well,
and what disturbs me more is not Steph Curry doing this shit. Is that so many of us buy into it. I mean, the fact that 19 Keys can sell out the Apollo, that's what's disturbing to me. You know, the masses of the people swallowing this shit.
I think it's more so of, I don't know if it's the content as much as it is the idea of celebrity. Like, so when you got social media, and so I normally, if I see some people out or this event, I look at the amount of people who want to take pictures and post on social media. And I think that's more of the draw than people literally listening to or regurgitating or even understanding what the hell he's talking about.
But here's the thing about celebrity. What is a celebrity?
A cannon fodder or marketer for the capitalists.
Right, but exactly. So a celebrity, it's not, we know, just for the sake of the audience, because we know that a celebrity does not mean that a person has immense talent. It doesn't mean that a person has immense talent for sports, entertainment, and this and that, because we've seen people with immense talent who go under the radar that nobody pays attention to. And we see people who have no skill and no talent whatsoever, and they can draw 100,000 people to Times Square just with a tweet. So a celebrity is an individual who embodies the aspirations of the system at that time. A celebrity is a person who embodies the inspiration, who has captured the attention of the masses by embodying their aspirations. So if I hit a lick tomorrow and I was able to go online and start posting images of a lavish lifestyle, I can get to celebrity status. And I can't rap. I can hoop, but I don't hoop enough that anybody else besides my wife and kids should pay attention to me hooping. And should nobody else come pay to see me hoop. So these celebrities, it's not people following celebrity culture. It's people buying into what culture those celebrities embody. So it's still disturbing. So you don't just become a celebrity because you're good at something or because you're famous or charismatic. So even when you look at celebrities saying that why are they worthy of celebration? What system or status quo do they embody? Are they the living ambassadors of that they're selling to the rest of us?
So I see Afra Sings and Zinzi Bell asked a question, and I would love, actually, we can share the link. I would love for both of y'all to come on and we can kind of dialogue around this, because I think there's a question that I would have to ask before I even begin to try to answer that question from you. So let me know if y'all want to come on. We can definitely bring y'all on. But while y'all figuring that out, so Diallo, there's this thing of that's happening right now in the streets. I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of people are actually claiming freedom and liberation and togetherness and solidarity and all this other stuff. And there's been some developments and there's been some talking and some jokes. You have Tariq Nasheed doing a damn comedy show based off of it. But what's been your thoughts and experiences as you see interviews with the chair, you see Aquaman, you see all this, chatter? What's your thoughts?
I have enjoyed it. I think it's entertaining. I did do a write-up. Go to my Facebook. I did a write-up on that because just to put it in its proper perspective, because what's been more surprising to me is the detractors. What we saw in Alabama, in a more technical term, can be called an affirming incident. It wasn't revolutionary. It's not a transformative moment. It was just an affirming incident. When you look at phenomenon like that, when I see things like that happen, in this time we call them viral moment. I pay more attention to how the community receives it, more so than what the incident was itself. And I think that the reason I call it an incident, because it's really, as some people saying, oh, things are different now and this and that. What really is, it's an affirming incident, meaning that Black people, even if we diverge on our views and diverge on our ideology, diverge on our religious and spiritual beliefs, there should be some core ideas and core positions that you don't even have to be educated into, that just resonate throughout our culture. And so this thing to say, hey, because I wanted to ask you and talk to you about, I'd like to say that the myth of nonviolent resistance is finally fully dead within the Black community.
You think
Meaning that I think it's dead, meaning that nonviolence is not a peaceful march. That's the thing that when we talk about nonviolence, it's not about saying, hey, this incident happened and we're going to take to the streets and march. We're going to protest and we want the protest to be peaceful. I agree with that. Nonviolence is if you are attacked, if you are spat upon, if your oppressors show up with which they did with to attack you, that you will not fight back, you will not strike back. So I am nonviolent. I support nonviolence, but the concept of nonviolence got warped into non-retaliation, non-self-defense. And I think that even though there are some Black people who still hold to that obsolete tactic of nonviolence, I think the one thing that affirms to me that we as a people, as a collective, the vast majority of us have abandoned that and haven't been indoctrinated into that. And to be honest with you, the majority of Black people never held to that. It was just that the Black people who practice that or articulate that were given artificial status and prominence in the collective. But now I think I can't even think of one prominent Negro. And for every Negro that like the Wayans brother, one of the Wayans brothers, and all the other Negro that tried to attack this event or attack the Black people who stood up for each other and themselves, I think that the way the community, so I think this is an affirming incident, and it has either greatly diminished, if not eliminated, the concept that has plagued us of nonviolence.
So I think there's been a lot of regurgitation and rehashing of the "we're not our ancestors" bullshit, and so even that sentiment. And we had a call with some brothers the other morning, and the idea that we're fighting and our ancestors didn't fight, when the reality is, even if you watch that first video, sounds like a Black lady saying, "Oh, they whipping that man ass, they whipping that Black man ass," and then when the Black people fought back, she said, "Arrest all their ass." But there was a lot of people who actually wasn't fighting, right? I'm not sure if there was more people fighting than not fighting. So even that is kind of this idea of like we're doing way more fighting than we are, and then this spontaneous, sporadic fighting instead of consistent, actual, real confrontational struggle has just been, to me, annoying. And then even the idea of self-defense versus violence, like, would you say that defending yourself should be deemed as violence, or is it something else?
Yeah, defending yourself is violence, but there's 3 types of violence as you can define. Ascending violence, lateral violence, and descending violence. I think the only justified form of violence that can happen amongst Black people is ascending violence. Every other violence harms us or diminishes us in some way, even though some of this lateral and descending violence is justified. And as simple as ascending violence is when you do violence against people who stand higher than you on the hierarchy. Lateral violence is when you do violence against people who are on the same level of the hierarchy or the society as you. Descending violence is when you do violence against people beneath you in status in the hierarchy. So sometimes descending violence is people have to do descending violence and lateral violence, but that is never violence we should praise or celebrate. It is violence that we have to understand is we have to reduce, and we have to cultivate and direct ascending violence.
So 1.5 question. And so would you feel comfortable with saying that self-defense, instead of being violence, is the consequences of violence? And then even with the coup that we talked about, would you call that violence, or what was happening to the people as violence? Because again, I think we talk about psychic violence, we talk about political, economic violence, emotional, whatever. When you think about it, again, the first question is like, would you call self-defense more so of the consequences of violence? And the coup, would you call what's been happening to them before the takeover, would that be called violence as well?
Well, I think national defense is different than self-defense. I think when a institution, especially an institution that is within the apparatus of the state engages in violence, I don't think we could ever call that self-defense, no matter where it's come from. If they're fighting off an invading army, then that is a national defense, is not necessarily self-defense. If a military attacks its own government, that's a coup d'etat. That's also, even if the government is tyrannical and illegitimate, that's still not a self-defense. That is one structure. But government institutions and government structures take over each other all the time. They get captured all the time. It's just we recognize military takeovers because it's the military. If it bleeds, it leads. But there's often time where civilian governments or the legislative, judicial branch of a government can take over the military and put their and handpick generals. There's often many unqualified, incompetent military leaders who are put in place not because they are good at national defense or the structure of the military. They're just there because they know the right people. So governments, as they work to have their to maintain the unjust apparatus of the state, there are often internal turmoil and internal conflicts that we often incorrectly take sides on, when neither one of them are fighting on our behalf. They're just fighting for their interest within the power structure, when the whole damn power structure is not really serving the people but exploiting the people. So I wouldn't call that self-defense. We can discuss whether or not it was an act of national defense and in the interest of the nation, but militaries don't exist. I mean, even the Supreme Court is like, individuals and civilians aren't even entitled to be defended by the government. They are here to govern us, to police us, but when it comes to defending us, they often drop the ball and even legally say, well, you're not entitled to police protection or military protection.
So one of the things that I actually just found out, I didn't know majority of those people was workers. And then I think there's once the ship came in or the boat came in, some of the customers was fighting too. But like initially, again, I didn't know they was workers. But what if someone was to say like, well, the first guy was a guard, or he was a security guard, so he's like the police, and black people defending the police, or like how would you have responded, hypothetically, I guess, if that was a actual black police getting attacked by white people? Would you personally?
He wasn't a cop. He was a dock worker.
Yeah, right.
He was a dock worker.
In an example,
if it depends. Again, if I see some Antifa attacking, well, it depends. Again, you have to look at the circumstances. When they enhanced the audio, they heard the assailants using the N-word. They were using racial slurs. Mm-hmm. And when they went and found out who those people are, it shows that they have right-wing views. So this wasn't just a dispute about docking boats. This was a racially motivated attack by racially motivated individuals. Whereas if you have a cop, and if a group of white people attack a cop and it's racially motivated, then I support them. But if a group of white people attack a cop and it's ideologically and politically motivated, then I would support the group. So if the cop shows up and there's an uprising in the community, and the cop puts on his badge and goes out there to represent the police and acting as a police officer, and there's some anarchists or communists or whatever, and then that conflicts happen, then I'm with the anarchists. It's not even that hard. It's pretty it's pretty clear to me, at least. What capacity was that man acting, and what were the motivations of his assailants?
I mean, I thought he was like a dock security. I'm not sure what. I mean, again, I didn't really dive into the video like people analysis and historical context.
Even if he was let's say he was a uniformed police officer, those people were not acting against the apparatus. Those are some black the blue Urugus. They back the blue. So even if you are attacking a black person I don't like because that black person is black, then it's an affront to me. Okay. It's an affront to me. But if I see
security guard, he wasn't a security guard. Well,
But
some people saying he is, some people saying he ain't, but okay.
It's not relevant because they weren't attacking him because he was a security guard. They weren't trying to fight him because he was acting on behalf of an unjust power structure or an unjust hierarchy. So it doesn't matter what capacity he was there acting. You know, I just saw this. I read this article and it accompanied a video, and it showed a black man attacking. He was a domestic abuser, and the woman called the police to escort her into their residence so that she could collect her things under the security of the police. And they sent a lone black female police officer. And so while the wife was in there collecting her things under the protection of the police, this guy began to threaten and assault his wife and the police officer. He wasn't fighting that police officer because she was representing the systems and institutions and hierarchies of capitalism and white hegemony. He was attacking her because he saw these two black women trying to exercise authority over them. So in that situation, what do you conclude? So a lot of these issues, once you're clear on your ideology and your positions and your ultimate goals for justice, peace, redistribution, ecology, these type of conflicts, you can't. Well, I'm never like what that girl. What's that girl name? Issa Rae. I don't root for everybody black. You know, I think pro-blackness is a flawed concept. It has set us up for failure way too many times. So my blackness comes with caveats for ideology, motivations, and positions.
You want to take your you want to take some audience questions? We're gonna actually get to the Trump thing and wrap up. But do you want to bring this sister on for her to give us a question about how to earn her liberation? All right, yeah, I'll share the link.
Comments, and criticisms.
I'll share the link real quick. But while I'm sharing the link for you to come on, Diallo, you wanted to talk about the Orange Man. He's getting indicted. We got some right wing stuff. Even Umar was getting into his right wing bag. Like, what's going on with your Uncle Trump?
What really stood out to me is,
Ain't he from Chicago or something like that?
Who?
Trump.
Who from Chicago?
Trump.
Trump is an immigrant. He's
so red. I thought he was
Western European immigrant. No, Trump. He's the grandchild of an immigrant. You know, he's an invader. My ancestors been here longer, 10 times longer than his ancestors, and he wanted to talk about. But anyway, what stood out to me is that what's not being reported, you know, that the local governments and the federal government institutions are under high alert. I was downtown the other day, and I saw this little guard post by the federal building in downtown Chicago. And there was just U.S. Post Office people going in because all the deliveries come in through the basement. They have like a truck dock in the basement. And every car they had lined up, and they were going around those cars with dogs and with mirrors. And they had bomb smithing dogs and looking at the wiring, and everything was under high alert because the government intelligent and investigative bodies have concluded that there's a high risk for Trump supporters to commit acts of mass terror, bombings, shootings, and things of that nature. You know, so it was just curious to me that that's not being reported. You know, everybody acts like it's just illiterate, inbred hicks standing around with signs and posts when the Trump indictment articulated that they were fully willing and wanted to set themselves up to do mass cullings and mass detentions of people who oppose Trump's reign. So and I think that part of it's being ignored.
What do you think about this, the possible jail thing? I know they said that he could possibly keep secret services, and there's loopholes for him to never even go to jail or even be house arrest in his big ass place. Like, what do you think is going to happen with that? And then even with him running and now being the right wing's political prisoner or whatever. But
I think if Trump is convicted then and Biden is reelected, I think he will pardon Trump, and he will say that it's not to help Trump but to heal the nation. Just like Obama when he took office and people were literally like, your predecessor is an international war criminal. And he says, well, he's not going to look into the crimes of the Bush administration. And mainly it was because he had intended to exacerbate the crimes, but that's another discussion. And then when they was like, what about the financial services industry who have defrauded people of trillions of dollars across the globe and upended the financial markets across the globe? He says he's not going to convict them. And so what happens when these things happen, just like what's his name? Nixon was allowed to resign, and his predecessor pardoned him. So I think it will play out like Nixon does. And I think that the Trump's opponent will mistakenly believe that it is enough that he is exposed for the criminal he is, and we don't have to take it any further. So that's my prediction. I don't know for sure, but I think it'll play out just like Nixon, who was the last president to face criminal charges.
So I was about to skip the story altogether, and you said no, we need to cover it. What are things that Black people need to maybe be more aware of or pay attention to in this situation?
I just think, just like they said before, obviously the policing, the federal policing agencies believe that there is enough of a risk of Trump supporters doing terrorism, committing acts of mass terrorism, that they're taking extra precautions while they're not informing or equipping the public. So I think, just as a Black person, if you got to go to the federal, and I was actually downtown to go and holler about taxes. We were actually down at the state building, and which is cat a corner from the federal building. And when I saw this, and it's actually because whenever I'm downtown, I just see it's really lackluster security around the federal building. They have really beefed up security around those institutions. So if you're going to be around federal buildings, federal installations, any other facilities that are deemed as the deep state or whatever the QAnon and Trump supporters are calling it, I think you should just keep your head on the swivel. But I mean, if you're a Black person in America, we already have that heightened level of consciousness, and awareness and paranoia. But as it was once stated to me by my aunt, you need perfect paranoia for total awareness. So I would just say, if you're around in those areas that the government believes could be targeted, it could be some Timothy McVeigh shit going off sooner or later.
So I don't know if Afra Sings was actually coming on, but I did share the link, and we're gonna.
What was her question?
Something about how do you earn liberation? My first question was gonna be, well, could you define what you think liberation is, so that we can kind of go there? Because I don't think we all.
But
have
that's not fair to ask her that, because we did call our show "Earn Your Liberation."
Well, yeah, but I think it's fair, because I don't think everybody has the same definition of liberation. I mean,
then they're either right or wrong, though.
They're right. So I want to.
They're accurate or inaccurate.
Before I answer the question, I would be making sure that we have the same definition of liberation. So that's what I would ask first. But I mean, we can answer that if you want to answer that.
But I think we have to confess that we called our show "Earn Your Liberation" as a snub to earn your leisure.
Right.
We identified and agreed early on that the Nazi death camps had a rhetoric that said work will set you free. That somehow, as a human being born of earth, you're not entitled to comfort. You're not entitled to food, shelter, these things that many of us on the left understand to be fundamental human rights, not something that should be subjected to the whims of the market or be established to generate profits for the elites, but something that is collectively created, collectively sustained, and should be collectively distributed. So earning your leisure is a rather obscene concept. And the fact that we have prominent race traders who go out here and validate this work is freedom, or work will set you free. So we named it Earn. I don't really like earnings because it is a commercial thing, but as for to juxtapose ourselves, that if we're going to go out and collectively work and make sacrifices and fight for something, it shouldn't be leisure, it should be liberation. Because even if I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying you will agree that there's no, I guess, in the sentiment of like, we can take a non-aggressive or non-confrontational approach to liberation or freedom It's just not a thing. So it will have to be confrontational. So there's a level of material wins we would have to earn. That's not just going to be given to us. So you
Yeah, but that's putting a lot of work on the word earn, because people go to work and
Yeah.
earn their incomes every day. People earn, you know, my child earns his allowance. So I think if we weren't trying to juxtapose ourselves to this overwhelming force, and we have the scholar Jared Ball, who has, you know, been on the front lines of attacking this very concept of earn your leisure and financial literacy. So the branding and the name was to assert that we are the alternative to that rhetoric of financial literacy and closing the wealth gap that we're offering. So it's a play on words, but it would be more accurately called fight for your liberation or organize for liberation. We just use the EYL acronym to call out the hustlers.
Leah be our show police. She says, what's the point of her coming on if she ain't got no, what, I don't know. But because we open the link for people to ask questions, and the people want to ask questions. So Afra, I know we kind of already answered your question, but was there a follow-up question or another question or anything you wanted to share?
I didn't realize I was on already. I actually didn't hear you because I was trying to get on. Okay. But I caught the end of it, and you said it was, the title was a counter to earn your leisure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so no, I was just asking about how we earn our liberation, because I tune in where I can for the past couple years, and I'm still trying to get a full handle on anti-capitalist ethos and like the plan for infrastructure post-capitalism. And that's the part that I still struggle with. Now, I know I'm not a scholar, as you just mentioned Jared is. But yeah, like I'm like, okay, what's what is like the basic steps that we should take? Because I should also say, like, I live in these spaces where I'm constantly interfacing with the wealthy folks because I work in philanthropy. So I'm literally, when Diallo said, are they giving out money? I'm the person going and saying, give us the money. It doesn't really belong to you. And at the same time, I know like that's not the solution to all the ills and all the problems that we actually want to face and tackle and like actually rebuild for ourselves. So it's like, where do we actually rebuild these things? Like everybody that's here on the platform, like, as much as we decry like the evils of capitalism, like we all still live under that system. Like, how do we actually liberate ourselves from that system?
I think that's a legit. Did you want to go?
Go ahead.
Or, I think that's a legitimate question. Again, I think that earn your liberation, the title for our show, is a play on words. First of all, freedom and liberation should be inherent. It's nothing you have to earn. It should be inherent. And if you're denied liberation, if you're denied your freedom, then you're not earning it back, because nobody can justifiably deny it to you. That's why if we were really being, accurate or direct in our concept of freedom, you have to organize for or fight for your liberation. But because of this, from the corruption of the reparations movement by the FBI, FBA, and ADOS, and the proliferation of prosperity politics, where Black people engage the political system and come together in order to get rich, not to get liberated, we want to capture that and redirect that fallacy. But in terms of what does liberation looks like, it means the dismantling of unjust hierarchies. It means that the wealth is understood to be held in common and to be generated in common. Meaning that an individual, liberation is an individual like Jeff Bezos would not exist. The elimination of unjust hierarchies and oligarchies, the redistribution of the resources to the people, the end of the destruction and hyper exploitation of the ecosystem, and the economy being captured within the scale of the ecology, and the restoration of ecosystems, the giving everyone the resources necessary to both not just live dignified lives, but to engage and cultivate their own potential. Liberation is nothing more than the dismantling and elimination of unjust hierarchies. And a lot of people get that twisted because they understand the police, the government, the corporations, but then they come home into their intimate spaces and still want to sustain and create unjust hierarchies. That's what one of my main problems with people like Umar and these other so-called what I call empty militants or reactionary Black Puritans, where they really believe that we can have intimate space hierarchies but still challenge and condemn the societal, political, and economic hierarchies or even theological hierarchies.
So I always wonder whenever people talk about the idea of capitalism and then, oh, well, we have to live under it, because I'm always trying to find clarity on what is being said. We have to live in capitalism, so we might as well participate in it. And then when you participate in it, how are you participating in it? Because with the idea of, or the notion of Black capitalism, many Black people think that they actually participate in a way where they're benefiting from it. So for instance, when you talk about the philanthropic world, the philanthropists are using the state to create, they have tax shelters and also to like pacify the actual condition. So essentially they're paying those people in the middle the money that they could give directly to the people. And those people are making lofty type, money, like $100,000, $70,000, whatever. And so in essence, I'm not sure whenever people are critiquing the idea of like, well, how do we deal with capitalism when we live under? It's like, you're not really benefiting. Well, obviously you're benefiting from it, but you're not participating as a capitalist. You either participating as somebody getting destroyed by the capitalist or the cannon fodder for the capitalist. Both, you're not really participating. So when you say something about capitalism, but then you say we have to participate in, like what are you?
I didn't say we have to participate in it. I said we all of us here on the screen as well, like we all live in this capitalist society. I don't personally have any separate structure, situation outside of the structure that we're in. Like I don't live on a self-sustained farm. I don't have sovereignty in, in my land and all these things like that. So I know that there are little pockets of people, but like I said, I'm basically just like, how do we, how do we actually start to build that for ourselves? So I think that's probably when I first saw like Earn Your Liberation, I was like, oh yeah, I want to and again, knowing, yes, of course, you can't earn something someone's taken from you, you have to take it back. But even when you're saying organizing against it or what was the second one? Obviously that's still work, which is earning. So I mean, like I get the concept, and that's really what I really just have been like, okay,
right, but
how do we get there?
If someone stole your bike,
I've had it stolen and I've taken it back.
The person did you earn your bike back? Did you earn your bike from the person who stole it from you?
To be real,
huh?
I said they fucked my bike up, to be real, but I take it back.
Right. Well, you just in the concept of earning, like I said, that's not how Jared, myself, or Geechee would articulate it in conversation. It's the branding for the show, and I explained that. But in terms of the process, as opposed to trying to explain what liberation would look like, what is the process to getting to that? What it looks like. First is ideology, and then organization, and then execution. You have to understand what specifically your goals are and why those are your goals. And are those goals viable? Is what you want for yourself and the world, is it even viable? Is it rational? Once you have your ideology locked in, then you organize. You figure out what your deficits are, what assets do you have, what are the vulnerabilities of your targets. And then once that's understood, once you have the proper ideology, you organize, then you execute the various objectives. Those can come in the forms of mass organizations. It can come in the form of projects. It can come in the form of strategic partnerships. But the path is ideology, organizing, execution. But each of those levels, that's how you go about the process of going from a state of oppression to a state of freedom or liberation.
So,
but each of those levels has levels. So, but that's the overview or the umbrella.
And so, starting with the first one, that's why I would ask the question whenever one asks this question. I ask a follow-up question before answering: is what does liberation mean to you? What does it look like? And what are the material conditions that you want to see? And it doesn't have to be an elaborate answer, but like in your own words, how would you define what liberation is, or what you think the material reality should be for people?
That's a very heady question. I think just for me personally, like my idea of liberation is, people being free to breathe, to exist, to thrive, to procreate. What liberation looks like to me, like not obviously not the exact thing, but animals in the wild. They're not beholden to corporate structures. They're not beholden to certain, like they absolutely have ways of lives. They absolutely have organization, little creepy crawling ants to large animals, and obviously they're affected by human activity in the planet that they share with us. But I think that when it comes to how you actually live, like they actually live, they live, they eat, they have leisure, they procreate, like they explore, they exist. They have structure, but it's based on their actual living and ability to what's the word, to live out their lives, to do the things that they need to do for themselves, for the structure of like their family units, and or their like their packs and their like their faunas and all of these different structures, or the schools of fish or whatever. Like they obviously they're still they still have predators, they still have war, they have all these things, but they actually live in a way that is natural. So I think that's probably what I think liberation looks like, us having a more natural existence on the planet.
Okay. So, and then in terms of just real quick, when you think about wealth, in the concept that how do you think wealth is built in this country, or how should wealth be built when you think about that?
Oh, well, that's that's a whole different thing, because the way that wealth is perceived in this country is something that we all, it's like a mind trick that we subscribe to, because the actual wealth is really built off when you're talking about Amazons and things like that, like there's this huge, where am I over here? So you have this huge body of the actual work or labor that's done, and then you have like this singular dictate of how that's going to be calculated, how that's going to be valued, and that is not accurate. I think wealth is people. I think wealth is again how we actually live and contribute, how we actually are able to exist in the world. And I think that's the thing that is not calculated correctly. To basically say that there's 1 million people here in this space, but we only see that as 100,000 people.
Okay. So yeah, I was just curious about those questions, because again, when Diallo talk about the first thing is ideology, I feel like we are normally everywhere with that. And so I'm not sure that people could even fight for or struggle for, or even organize around any type of thing when they don't have the same idea. So last week we talked about people still claiming that they're natives, and other people saying, this about entrepreneurship or whatever the case may be. I feel like that's kind of the first thing, because most of the time, even with Jared's book, you talked about Jared, when Jared say, oh, there's no such thing as a black buying power, or we don't have this, people quickly ask, well, what's the solution? And seems like people want just this, like, give me all the answers and we can just get it done. And I don't think the world works like that. But I don't know if you have any more questions, but if anybody else have any questions, we're gonna be wrapping up. And I appreciate you for jumping on.
Thanks for
thank you so much.
having me.
All right, peace. Take care. All right, Diallo, if there's some closing remarks, what you got going on, if there are, I thought it was another question, but I think I passed it. You got to put it in the comments again. Any other closing remarks, Diallo? You're on mute if you're talking. Oh, I don't.
It's curious that he was post that because I always say unjust hierarchies. Every time I've mentioned hierarchies as something we should oppose, I've said unjust hierarchies.
Well, earlier you said something about the state. Then, so would you say all states are bad? Because it sounded like you were saying that earlier.
I think that that's a good question. Most states that I've been exposed to that I've studied are bad. I don't adhere to anti-statism or anarchies, but I think states are bad to the extent that most of the things we seek as liberationist and revolutionary puts us in direct opposition to the state. You know, many of the things the states exist to maintain hierarchies, and so the state exists to maintain status quo, and the status quo across the globe is white hegemony and racism, and white hegemony and capitalism. So
your answer is no, but most of the ones that you haven't been good.
Well, I mean, I'd be interested in seeing a good state. And most state that we could even define as good, it's in spite of the state. It's because of other conditions forcing the state or pushing the state towards goods. But inherently and intrinsically,
wait, you said forcing and pushing, meaning they control the state apparatus?
No, they're not in control of the state apparatus. Most governments do good because they in fear of the people. Many of the governments that enact good policy is not because the state is good, but because the state feels that it's vulnerable. So most states that I see end up speaking to the needs of the people, regardless of what that policy or position is of the state. It's because the state views itself as being vulnerable to other forces and therefore must act in a way to shore up that vulnerability. And what we've often seen is when the state grants you a right or grants you a concession or reallocates resources to something appropriate, when that threat that provoked the state to do that, when that threat is neutralized, however, they always revert back to repression. So every state that I've recognized.
So there
could be a state that hasn't done that. I'd love to see it.
All right. So there's two questions that I think I saw, and we're gonna try to tackle this. So the first one was your thoughts on universal basic income, and the other one was thoughts about the buying power possibilities. So I think Jared, I don't know, Diallo, if you finished the book yet. Me and Diallo are supposed to interview Jared. We're gonna have a grill session on him about his book. But the first one, I think
when is that happening?
That's why I just asked. Are you finished reading the book?
Actually, no, I haven't finished the book. Last night I just finished reading Locking Up Our Own, and I should have picked up Jared's book, but I started two other texts. And then I actually started going through the Tocqueville, Democracy in America. I'm a mess over here.
Well, when you finish that, we can do that.
Okay, then it's on me. Then I set the timeline because you know it's a very engaging read, but you know I need to sit down and cover to cover because I be jumping from book to book. I'm a book hoe.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
I jump from book to book article. I just need to sit down and commit to one book.
So universal basic income, I think, is something that's really good to struggle for. I don't think it's the end all solution, but I also know that it's I know that it can be done really easy by the U.S. government, and I think
trap. I'm sorry.
Why so?
A minimum wage means absolutely nothing without a maximum wage. If you build a structure that has a floor but no ceiling, the floor becomes rotten and warped. It is more, and we've seen that if we set the upper income tax rate to 100%, it will do more to balance the goods and services and incomes of the masses than it is. So the problem with the economy is not the poor. The poor people, the people who lack resources, are not the problem. So whatever you do to or for them may mitigate some of the symptoms of the problem, but it doesn't solve the problem. The problem in this economy and the world economy are the elites. So if you are doing something that leaves the elites to their devices, whatever you do for the people at the bottom. So universal basic income, which I would support. And like I said, if Stir Curry was coming here to give away wealth, I'd be the first in line. I'd be sleep. And if universal basic income became available, I'd be down there filling out whatever applications and asking my niece, can I use the social security number of her kids, and doing whatever I got to do. Food stamps,
that's the second
welfare,
part of the statement.
Housing for all. But when you're looking at a problem in a society, this is from Dr. Amos Wilson, you can't look at who suffers. You have to look at who profits, who benefits from a problem. You have to target. So how does a universal basic income target the people who create the actual economic imbalance and injustices in the society? It often leaves them free to frolic across the globe, raping the resources of all. Because if we all got a universal income, all the multi-corporations would go into the boardroom and say, hey, how do we get these peasants to spend to put the money in our coffers versus someone else's? Universal basic income does not threaten capitalism. It does not threaten corporatism. It does not threaten global white hegemony. It is not a solution, but I don't oppose it. If you can get it, get it. But don't rest on that.
Yeah. So again, that's what I'm saying. When it will be a good thing to struggle for, and obviously it can be easily done by through the Federal Reserves or any other means, but it's not a place to stop. I would love to see people have more money so they can meet their material needs, but will it be something to pacify the people?
But we saw that with the fight for 15.
No, because the fight for 15 don't mean that people without a jobs can get $15 too, but still $15 ain't enough. So what I'm saying is having
exactly. So then we go from fighting for a universal income, and then we'll be fighting for, and then the government will say, well, we're going to freeze the UBI at this level. And then people are going to be like, well, the UBI is not keeping pace with inflation. And then it's a whole nother fight when we should, when our goal should not to be getting proper.
So the larger question
I just think it's a trap.
How do you not get pacified? Because if you agree that you will take it, which I'm agreeing.
Yeah, I take it. I ain't turning down.
But nothing. I'm saying, how do it not become a trap that we be like, okay, we won, we made it. Just like the white boy got punched on the boat, we won. The universal basic income here, we won. Let's stop fighting. How do we make sure we not get trapped in those spaces?
By simply informing the ideology organization. And part of organizing, once we have organizing, is media apparatus, educational infrastructure, outreach, rhetoric, propaganda. The root word of propaganda is to propagate. We have to get these messages out. And I think the boulevard is where we can do this shit more so than the billboard, because the billboard, there are certain paywalls and hindrances to our access. And even when we get access, more so than us capturing those media outlets, they more so capture and repurpose what we do for them. So the way you do that, and not the myth, because I don't think that a universal basic income will pacify the masses, because I think in short order, before they sweep up all the confetti from the UBI parade, I think people will pretty much say, hey, this doesn't work. I think we need to engage with our people and let them know, if you want to solve poverty, you go to the source of poverty. And the source of poverty is not poor people. The source of poverty, poor people are the outcome of or a symptom of the system. So if you want to deal with poverty, go to the source of poverty.
So real quick, I wanted to get to the other question. I just want to say this real quick, and then because Diallo brought up the Amos Wilson, I want to get your thoughts on this Amos Wilson versus Francis Quest penis envy. Pause. So I don't think, like Jared brought when we talked about GDP, when you're focused on the person who's spending. So I think the example he uses when a person buy a sandwich from the sandwich shop, you talk about buying power as the person who's spending the dollars to buy the sandwich, as opposed to the shop owner and the person who's bringing it from the farm to the store. And having this idea around buying power is just convoluted. So yeah, I would agree with him on that. But in terms of this quote, right? So I don't know if you remember this conversation that I believe that Amos, and then when you listen to the whole lecture, I believe he was kind of taking a shot at Dr. Frances Cress as her analysis around penis envy was kind of pseudoscience or pointless is what he was saying. But I want you to listen to this and then respond to it with your thoughts before we wrap up.
Material advantages to the race that is empowered to practice. It is enough that white men get material wealth from oppressing black men. Power and what? Prestige from oppressing black men. Comfort from oppressing black men. We don't have to go into the underwear. We don't have to go into the jeans. Hey, I'm living well, and I want to what? Keep living well. And if that means putting my foot on your neck, that's what I'm going to do. It doesn't matter if I have no penis. That's the deal. So, it's good and it's intriguing. There's a lot to that and it explains a lot. But then at the same time, we have to keep focused on some things here. What is it? That racism provides economic, political, psychological, and social advantages. And it is highly unlikely that whites are going to be what? Persuaded out of those advantages.
So I don't know if you remember the whole lecture, but he drove home some points. He talked about imperialism, and even with Frances Cress, sometimes she speaks reductively about
everything is a penis.
Yeah. So what's your thoughts around that in terms of?
I don't think that he was a detracting from or going at Dr. Welsing, but I do think he was trying to expand or expound, go beyond, and going beyond someone's analysis isn't necessarily disrespectful or challenging or attacking them. Somebody could have an incomplete analysis or a particular focus in their analysis that someone else can broaden or go beyond. It ain't really beef. The ISIS papers, I agree. The ISIS papers is it's got some issues, a lot of issues, and it's rather elementary. And I'm not sure if she made it elementary on purpose or is that because in some other interviews I've seen her kind of go on.
I know we got to go, but I will send you the link if you want to argue the penis envy.
But I have to go too. But we can't say that they do it strictly for comfort, because we've seen white people blow up and go against their own economic interests in order to harm other people. So we've seen them lose and sacrifice wealth in order to do harm. So, and Dr. Bobby E. Wright, who was scientific in his analysis, said that there is definitely evidence and a strong argument for a biological component of white aggression, that there is a biological and genetic component to Western aggression. And also the ISIS papers, also, anthropologists and archaeologists and social scientists says that, this is so ingrained in this culture. It ain't just about money, because white people went into essentially paradise and destroyed paradise to terraform paradise to fit their warped sense of the world. But yeah, I have to go too. I'm way over.
Yeah, definitely.
But let's pick this up next time, Frances Cress Welsing, because I think that is something that is worth talking about, especially in this time where we in Pound Town and penis envy and all that, and Sukiana joining the Pan-African struggle.
By all means, I wasn't trying to say that he was disrespecting her, but in that whole clip, he do make some jokes about like all that psychobabble, blah, blah. Like he does it in a respectful way. But Yeah.
I think it was appropriate. His criticisms were appropriate, but I don't think it was really him attacking her as opposed to going beyond her.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't think, like, if somebody can take my conclusions and my analysis and run with it, I encourage. That's why everything I post publicly is public comments. Dissect and restructure my shit as much as you need to get to our ultimate goal of Pan-African liberation. Anyway, with that, I have to be out, man. So you can see folks out. I'm way behind the
we out of here. We out of here. Bye. Y'all have
All
a
right,
good
peace.
evening, night, weekend, all that. So peace.
They say when you wear Black Power Media gear, you can accomplish anything. You play any and every position. Coaching, to kicking, to receiving, to running and juking. And oh my goodness, let's see that again in slow motion. Get off me. And you're going to have a lot of haters coming at you, but what you got to do is you got to shake them off, and get to your goal and accomplish it. And when that's done, it's a beautiful thing. I'm talking about going hard, extra, for that extra point. And when it's done beautifully, you talking about touchdown. Oh, and the crowd goes wild and they're celebrating with you and everything. Man, let's see that again. Nice.
Black Power Media, baby. That's how we do it.
Now go to blackpowermedia.org and get you some of that gear. Empower yourself today. Yeah.